At Intrasoft, if there is one concept that describes who we are and what we do, it is innovation. That is the single word that captures the true essence of our efforts. But what is the true meaning of innovation? Is it just a vague definition? Is it a badge on the shirt of an employee? Or is it a poster on the cafeteria wall? No. Innovation constitutes the backbone of our corporate DNA. We are practically made of it. We live by it. We breathe it. And it can be easily summed up in two simple words: question everything. One solution against another. One idea against another. The better for the good. The best for the better. Nothing less, nothing more. It is our team of creative thinkers that gets us there. People who know that in order to agree, they must first see things differently. The 1,700 IT professionals of 20 different nationalities across the Intrasoft Group are the people behind all the innovative breakthrough technology products and services we deliver across 70 countries. From our cutting-edge e-customs technologies to digital analytics solutions, our people know well that innovation, first and foremost, is an exercise for daring hearts and brains. A leap out of one's comfort zone. Innovative minds are the reason we grow strong for the last 20 years. Because innovation is not written, it is coded into our DNA.
Για περισσότερα από 30 χρόνια, το Ινστιτούτο Βιομηχανικής Εκπαίδευσης και Κατάρτισης προσφέρει γνώσεις και δεξιότητες για πρωτοπορία. Με προγράμματα προσαρμοσμένα στις ανάγκες των συνεργατών μας, εκπαιδευόμενων και επιχειρήσεων. Προγράμματα που ενσωματώνουν την καινοτομία και εξωστρέφεια, που αναδεικνύουν δεξιότητες, συνδέουν τη γνώση με την αγορά εργασίας, προετοιμάζουν για τις εξελίξεις. Με παραρτήματα και σύγχρονες δομές που διασφαλίζουν την ποιότητα και αρτιότητα των υπηρεσιών μας σε κάθε γωνιά της χώρας μας. Διεθνείς πιστοποιήσεις και διαπιστεύσεις που επιβραβεύουν τη δράση μας και επισφραγίζουν την ποιότητά μας. Εφαρμοσμένη τεχνολογία μάθησης. Υπερσύγχρονα, πιστοποιημένα εργαστήρια για άμεση και μεθοδευμένη αλλαγή του τρόπου δουλειάς. Συνδέουμε τη θεωρία με την πράξη. Την πράξη με το αποτέλεσμα. ΙΒΠ. γνώσεις και δεξιότητες για πρωτοπορία.
At Intrasoft, if there is one concept that describes who we are and what we do, it is innovation. That is the single word that captures the true essence of our efforts. But what is the true meaning of innovation? Is it just a vague definition? Is it a badge on the shirt of an employee? Or is it a poster on the cafeteria wall? No. Innovation constitutes the backbone of our corporate DNA. We are practically made of it. We live by it. We breathe it. And it can be easily summed up in two simple words: question everything. One solution against another. One idea against another. The better for the good. The best for the better. Nothing less, nothing more. It is our team of creative thinkers that gets us there. People who know that in order to agree, they must first see things differently. The 1,700 IT professionals of 20 different nationalities across the Intrasoft group are the people behind all the innovative breakthrough technology products and services we deliver across 70 countries. From our cutting-edge e-customs technologies to digital analytics solutions, our people know well that innovation, first and foremost, is an exercise for daring hearts and brains. A leap out of one's comfort zone. Innovative minds are the reason we grow strong for the last 20 years. Because innovation is not written, it is coded into our DNA.
Για περισσότερα από 30 χρόνια, το Ινστιτούτο Βιομηχανικής Εκπαίδευσης και Κατάρτισης προσφέρει γνώσεις και δεξιότητες για πρωτοπορία. Με προγράμματα προσαρμοσμένα στις ανάγκες των συνεργατών μας, εκπαιδευόμενων και επιχειρήσεων. Προγράμματα που ενσωματώνουν την καινοτομία και εξωστρέφεια, που αναδεικνύουν δεξιότητες, συνδέουν τη γνώση με την αγορά εργασίας, προετοιμάζουν για τις εξελίξεις. Με παραρτήματα και σύγχρονες δομές που διασφαλίζουν την ποιότητα και αρτιότητα των υπηρεσιών μας σε κάθε γωνιά της χώρας μας. Διεθνείς πιστοποιήσεις και διαπιστεύσεις που επιβραβεύουν τη δράση μας και επισφραγίζουν την ποιότητά μας. Εφαρμοσμένη τεχνολογία μάθησης. Υπερσύγχρονα, πιστοποιημένα εργαστήρια για άμεση και μεθοδευμένη αλλαγή του τρόπου δουλειάς. Συνδέουμε τη θεωρία με την πράξη. Την πράξη με το αποτέλεσμα. ΙΒΠ. Γνώσεις και δεξιότητες για πρωτοπορία.
At Intrasoft, if there is one concept that describes who we are and what we do, it is innovation. That is the single word that captures the true essence of our efforts. But what is the true meaning of innovation? Is it just a vague definition? Is it a badge on the shirt of an employee? Or is it a poster on the cafeteria wall? No. Innovation constitutes the backbone of our corporate DNA. We are practically made of it. We live by it. We breathe it. And it can be easily summed up in two simple words. Question everything. One solution against another. One idea against another. The better for the good. The best for the better. Nothing less, nothing more. It is our team of creative thinkers that gets us there. People who know that in order to agree, they must first see things differently. The 1,700 IT professionals of 20 different nationalities across the Intrasoft Group are the people behind all the innovative breakthrough technology products and services we deliver across 70 countries. From our cutting-edge e-customs technologies to digital analytics solutions, our people know well that innovation, first and foremost, is an exercise for daring hearts and brains. A leap out of one's comfort zone. Innovative minds are the reason we grow strong for the last 20 years. Because innovation is not written, it is coded into our DNA.
Για περισσότερα από 30 χρόνια, το Ινστιτούτο Βιομηχανικής Εκπαίδευσης και Κατάρτισης προσφέρει γνώσεις και δεξιότητες για πρωτοπορία. Με προγράμματα προσαρμοσμένα στις ανάγκες των συνεργατών μας, εκπαιδευόμενων και επιχειρήσεων. Προγράμματα που ενσωματώνουν την καινοτομία και εξωστρέφεια. που αναδεικνύουν δεξιότητες. Συνδέουν τη γνώση με την αγορά εργασίας. Προετοιμάζουν για τις εξελίξεις. Με παραρτήματα και σύγχρονες δομές που διασφαλίζουν την ποιότητα και αρτιότητα των υπηρεσιών μας σε κάθε γωνιά της χώρας μας. Διεθνείς πιστοποιήσεις και διαπιστεύσεις που επιβραβεύουν τη δράση μας και επισφραγίζουν την ποιότητά μας. Εφαρμοσμένη τεχνολογία μάθησης. Υπερσύγχρονα, πιστοποιημένα εργαστήρια για άμεση και μεθοδευμένη αλλαγή του τρόπου δουλειάς. Συνδέουμε τη θεωρία με την πράξη. Την πράξη με το αποτέλεσμα. ΙΒΠ. Γνώσεις και δεξιότητες για πρωτοπορία.
Konstantinos Doxiadis was a Greek architect, urban planner, and thinker. Among his hundreds of projects, he designed new cities, influencing the lives of millions of people in countries across the globe. Doxiadis was born in 1913 in Stenimokos, in southern Bulgaria, though soon after his family was displaced to Greece. In 1940, he fought for the defense of his country from fascist attack. In post-war years, he masterminded the reconstruction of the ravaged country. He later claimed that the experiences of childhood displacement and reconstruction were the two main influences in his working philosophy. Doxiadis' projects in more than 40 countries ranged from the design of large-scale buildings to the design of new cities to the settlement programs for whole countries. In a pioneering step, Doxiadis conceived of planning as a multidisciplinary science.
We have nature and man and society and the networks and the shells. 5 elements, but they can be seen in several ways. I mentioned already several. The economist can see it in one way, the social worker, the administrator, the technologist, or the one interested in cultural problems, aesthetic problems.
One of Doxiadis' central beliefs was what he called the human scale. He refused to allow high-rise buildings in his plans, believing in the concept of the neighborhood. He was one of the first to speak of the dangers of man-made pollution. In order to curtail it, he developed a vision of digital networking that would decrease physical machine-based traffic. The technology for it was invented years after his death in 1975.
Being an entrepreneur is a bug. It's an affliction I always had in my life. You see, you shouldn't lose sight of your purpose. What is your purpose? I want to build a company that is at least as good as the company that Thomas Edison did. The first thing that led to MIT was when I decided what country I wanted to build that company. When I wanted to pick my thesis, what I want to do is to work in preparing for my creation of my company, based on my inventions. The invention that I came up with for that company is to convert heat into electricity by boiling off electrons. For the first time, MIT used its own money to support my thesis. I turned the pages of the New York Times and found that the disease that killed more Americans every year is heart problems. I decided right there, that's our next business. We're gonna make an artificial heart. It's useful to set a certain direction you want to go. After you set the direction, don't focus in your goal. focus in enjoying the ride.
Γεια σας, είμαι ο Στέφανος Τσιτσιπάς και θέλω να εκφράσω τη στήριξή μου στους Innovative Greeks σε όλο τον κόσμο. Η δημιουργικότητα και το business είναι θέματα που με ενδιαφέρουν πάρα πολύ και είμαι χαρούμενος ότι υπάρχουν νέοι Έλληνες που θέλουν να γίνουν ηγέτες ώστε να βοηθήσουν την πατρίδα. Καλή επιτυχία!
Γεια σας, είμαι η Μαρία Σάκαρη. Θέλω να εκφράσω την στήριξή μου στους Innovative Greeks σε όλο τον κόσμο. Πολλούς από αυτούς γνωρίζω στα τουρνουά που έρχονται και με στηρίζουν στους αγώνες μου. Και εγώ με τη σειρά μου θέλω να τις φέρω πιο κοντά στην Ελλάδα. Καλή τύχη!
Hi, George Stephanopoulos here, wishing best of luck to the Innovative Greeks community. I know you're coming together for the future of Greece, for the future of the Greek diaspora in a creative, entrepreneurial way that we hope will create great success for Greeks everywhere. Good luck!
Εκ μέρους του Greek Tech θέλω να ευχηθώ καλή επιτυχία στο Innovative Greeks event που διοργανώνουν ο ΣΕΒ και η Endeavor Greece την ερχόμενη εβδομάδα. Και θέλω να καλέσω τα μέλη μας να συμμετάσχουν σε αυτή την πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα διοργάνωση. Είναι σημαντικό που ο κεντρικός φορέας της επιχειρηματικότητας στην Ελλάδα φέρνει για πρώτη φορά τους καινοτόμους Έλληνες όλου του κόσμου κοντά.
On behalf of our board of directors, our dedicated staff and the thousands of donors around the globe, we'd like to thank Innovative Greeks for asking us to be part of this conference and to wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.
We are so thrilled to be part of this conference organized by Innovative Greeks, and we can't wait to hear from this incredible cast of luminaries to recognize how far we've come and also how we forge a path forward. Best wishes to all.
I was thinking about all the things that define us as Greeks and came up with my top 10, so if you'll indulge me, I'll share them with you. The number 10 best reason is that we're popular and generally considered cool. Everyone you meet tells you they had a best friend in college, or the kid down the street's mother made the best glika, or the athlete or musician or teacher that inspired them. It seems we leave lasting impressions, and they're almost always flattering. Reason number 9 is that Greeks are passionate, which is why when you get two Greeks together, you have 3 opinions, and no one argues like the Greeks. It's sometimes a fierce argument, even screaming and yelling, which to the non-Greek observer appears very serious and substantial. But for the Greeks, once they decide what movie they're going to, or who sells the best feta, or whatever the argument was about, they move on without a second thought, leaving bystanders very confused about what just happened. The 8th reason is that you can always get a great meal if you're Greek. At home, at a relative's house, at a great restaurant, or especially in New York at a diner on virtually any corner, where if they find out you're Greek, there's always a little extra on the plate. 7th reason is that you can go to a friend's house, get completely drunk on his alcohol, play his music too loud, smash all his plates, and he cheers you on and invites you back, particularly if it's his name day. Now, who else does that? The 6th reason is that we're great lovers and hopeless romantics. And as we go through life, we inevitably break hearts, have ours broken, until we find the right person, as I did, who makes it all worth it. The 5th reason is that every time you go to dinner with Greek friends, you have a great time. That's despite the fact that it includes elaborate plotting about how you will get to pay the check before they do, and usually ends in a great scene and a fight over the bill, which is a dramatic flourish to the evening that only Greeks can do. But it ends with everyone laughing and hugging and plotting the next dinner. The 4th best reason is that when non-Greek prospective tourists tell us how excited they are to be going to Mykonos and Santorini, we get to smugly tell them about all the other amazing places they'll be missing. The 3rd reason is that we're intelligent and ambitious, and while we're driven to some extent by economic success and glory, for the most part, we do it out of a sense of pride. for the accomplishment, to make our parents and families proud, and to prove that Greeks can and do excel at whatever they put their minds to. The second best reason is that we deeply value our relationships, our families, our friends, and their families and friends. We stick together, we look out for each other, which is what makes an event like this so wonderful, to see so many of us gather to share our thoughts on being Hellenes and to discuss the future of the country we deeply love. And finally, the best reason to be proud of being Greek, evidenced by this event, is to believe that the best years of Greece were not just the massive contribution of our ancient ancestors, but the great future years ahead. Thank you very much.
Welcome, innovative Greeks. A couple of months ago, this was nothing more than an idea between a few friends. And over the past few months, this has become an event where over the course of the next 2 days, more than 10,000 people have registered to watch. It's a lot more than we ever expected, I got to tell you that. And it's a very diverse group, speakers and audience alike, from San Francisco to Sydney, from startups, universities, labs, huge companies, every age, gender, and occupation. Not just the kale-eating, almond milk drinking, sort of intermittent fasting startuppers, but all ages, every shape and form. Because innovation does not work within echo chambers. Diversity is innovation's oxygen. So we want to make this group really inclusive and certainly not a closed group. And that's why a lot of people have been helping to get this to happen. Not just Sev and Endeavor, but also Marina, Georgios Hadjopoulos' daughter, who's put together the Hellenic Innovation Network, part of MIT Enterprise Forum. Nondas at Greek Tech in New York, who's organizing Greeks from all over the States in technology to come together. Peter and Michael from the Hellenic Initiative, who've contributed so much to Greece through their efforts of mobilizing Greeks in the States. Spiros from Argo in Brussels. And quite important, consulates with people like Stratos in Boston and Daphne in San Francisco. Now, what are we really trying to achieve? It's quite simple. We want to build a global community of Greeks working in tech, life sciences, or innovating in any other field. It's a very inclusive group. And what we want to achieve is bring everyone together on a regular basis from around the world to exchange ideas, help each other, provide useful tools like job search. Panagiotis will be talking to you about workintech.gr, which is precisely this kind of tool. Company matchmaking platforms for cooperation, specialized events, debates, and more. Our emerging ecosystem needs, above all, knowledgeable and persistent people to succeed. And our diaspora can provide great team members, whether they come back or not, mentorship from the incredible Greeks we have around the world, introductions, data, or just Greek-to-Greek support, like a room to stay in Boston or in London or in San Francisco or in New York. Bottom line, this kickoff event is focused really today on and tomorrow on role models. Okay, so every community needs them as its backbone. It's the people who have led the way, from coming up with a vaccine from COVID in our first panel with Stelios Papadopoulos from Biogen, to inspiring through technology in movies like Jim Yiannopoulos that you heard earlier, or just disrupting with their products an entire industry. Other events we'll do later will be a lot more about networking and getting to know each other. And they will follow in the months to come. But what's the context? When I started Upstream, a mobile tech company 20 years ago in a small office in Ambelokipi with my partner Alex and a couple more people, the word startups didn't really exist. Greece didn't export any technology with some notable exceptions like RayCap. In fact, innovation really wasn't even a thing. One of the reasons we went into crisis was precisely because of that. You can't export without differentiated, exciting products. And you can't get such products without innovation and investment in R&D. But sometimes the darker the night, the brighter the stars. 20 years later, things have changed. We have a growing global community of Greeks in innovation. In fact, just to give you a number, companies founded by Greeks or people of Greek descent, I did a calculation, are worth in the technology space alone over 40 billion. But also Greek startups based in Greece alone, are surpassing 4 billion in valuations and attracting some of the best investors in the world. Life science startups are appearing every month from top researchers. Innovation is driving food, pharma, smart materials, and many more fields. And of course, our global Greeks are leading the way. Why now, you may ask? I mean, first reason is better now than never, but I think that the country has had a self-reckoning during the crisis on what went wrong in our economic model, what has happened, which is why this is the right time to launch this initiative. We are ready and eager to go faster. As much as I dislike national stereotypes, and I really do, we Greeks are inventive, like Ulysses. If there are three things that have been constant throughout history about Greeks, it's language, family, and inventiveness. We just lose a lot of that creative energy trying to cut corners, and we don't come together enough. These have been really our worst demons. Aristotle talked about eudaimonia, eudaimonia, finding your better demons, your best self. He didn't care much for happiness. He cared about eudaimonia. And he wanted people to find those better demons, their best self, consistently, every day, not just be heroes in special circumstances. And the road to eudaimonia involves courage, ambition, less fear of failure, that's the first thing. Don't be afraid to fail, try and fail again. Meritocracy, fairness, not favoritism, not special groups, not corruption. Moderation, aiming high, but at the end of the day, just staying low. But most important, empathy for other people and the ability to work together as a team. For the ancient Greeks, those who worked alone, or lived alone, or thought alone, were literally idiots, idiotes. So this is what we're all about. A work group that could accelerate the progress of Greece's innovation ecosystem with no fanfare, just hard work, great ideas, and a strong sense of community. And Dinos, who co-chairs our committee at SEV, that's been making a massive effort over the past 2 years to actually influence the government to produce legislation that will help this ecosystem, will just explain some of the things we've done.
Thank you, Marcos. It is a great honor, first of all, to welcome today some of the brightest minds around the world who are with us to contribute to a common vision to boost the innovation ecosystem in Greece. SEV Innovation Committee was established in 2017 with an objective to promote business innovation, to transform research carried out by our universities in marketable products and services, and strengthen startup technology companies through collaboration and networking. Our motto is speak less and do more. That's why in 2018, we produced a study with more than 70 proposals to the Greek government for the transformation of Greece into a technology hub for technology companies. Some of these proposals have been adopted and passed as law. A few examples: the stock option tax treatment with a goal to incentivize individuals to engage with their work in a more productive way. Angel investor incentives, 50% of the investment as a taxable income deduction. Over discounts of 200% for R&D expenses. Improvement of the second chance legal framework for young entrepreneurs that have failed in the past. The creation of Elevate Greece, a national register through which companies can access important incentives provided by the state and the European Union. The creation of a National Council for Research and Innovation. The design and promotion of the Innovation District in Attica, and many others. These are just a few examples of our work. Another important issue that our committee wanted to tackle was the need to accelerate and scale up new ventures. Given global competition and the size of the Greek market, it is important to create a culture of collaboration. Startups should interact with larger companies and universities and all other stakeholders. That's why we started the Innovative Greeks Initiative and the Innovation Ready Initiative, because we believe that together we can accelerate the development of the innovation ecosystem and maximize its footprint in the economy. Thank you for participating. I'll pass the floor to Panagiotis. Panagiotis.
Thank you, Konstantinos. It's the first time since it has been a while since I wear makeup, I'll tell you that. It's, Marco, thank you for bringing the two organizations together. You are part of the board on both organizations, SEV and Endeavor, and this has been your ambitious idea. This is it's an incredible journey so far, and thank you so much for that. We're excited to kickstart Innovative Greeks with SEV and so many more organizations involved. The timing is perfect. 2020 was the best year for Greek innovation yet. We had 2 record-breaking exits coming from Endeavor entrepreneurs, InstaShop and Softomotive. Both of them represent about 90% of the total value generated from Greek exits in 2020, and they have proved to be extremely high impact with a great multiplier effect for our market. In Greece, we work with the scale-up entrepreneurs who are building the next success stories, like the founders of Workable, Blueground, InstaShop, ElastDirect, and more. As a global organization, we've been working for quite some time now with diaspora Greeks also, like the founders of NovaCredit, Matternet, Number AI, and Miraculous, who just yesterday closed a 45 million Series B round. Finally, in our local program, that is for smaller but equally promising companies, we have 26 participants so far, like the founders of Hack the Box, Intelligentsia, Augmenta, and others. We work with an incredible portfolio of global outliers, innovative entrepreneurs who are transforming Greece. Overall, our entrepreneurs have raised more than 650 million in debt and equity from investors like Index, Kleiner Perkins, Bain Capital, Insight Partners, 83 North, and more. You'll hear from some of them over the next sessions. Endeavor Catalyst is our co-investment fund which has 400 million under management and an incredible performance so far. 11 unicorns and more than 120 companies which we have invested in over 40 markets. We expect to invest more than 15 million in Greek founders over the next 3 to 4 years, which is 5 times more than what we have invested in the last 3 years. Now, to this initiative that Marcos mentioned. Under the Innovative Greeks initiative and the broader need for international talent, we have created a portal called workintech.gr, which aims to connect our portfolio companies and the most significant high-tech job creators in the country with diaspora Greeks and international talent. You can apply there to get connected with the Greek founders and explore the possibility of relocating in Greece. This is one of the many ways we are planning to stay connected with you after this event. Καλή μας αρχή, Innovative Greeks. We look forward to working with you.
Now, we have an amazing panel coming up. It's being moderated by Stelios Papadopoulos, the chairman of Biogen. It includes George Yankopoulos, co-founder and president and chief scientific officer of Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. We have George Skangos, CEO of Vir Biotechnology, and Nikos Galakatos, global head of life sciences at Blackstone. Now, they're going to talk about founding, growing, and transforming business in innovation-based pharma, which is especially topical right now, given the COVID vaccine. So over to them now.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank the organizers for having us join this magnificent meeting today. I'll be extremely brief, largely because one of our panel members needs to be coming off the session in the next 5 minutes by virtue of emergencies in his day job. But let me just say a few words. All four of us are Greeks of the diaspora. We're immigrants. We're in the life sciences business. In some ways, we're scientific refugees. Just like a refugee that forcibly or voluntarily leaves their country, their motherland, to go someplace else, we as well have abandoned at one point in our lives reasonably predictable and well-defined academic scientific careers to go do something different. And I think each one's story is of interest. And rather than my speaking any longer, I want to turn to George Skangos, whom we have for another 4 minutes, maybe a minute or two longer, to just give us a little bit of a sense of where he was born, how he got started, and how his origins led him to be what he is now, at the forefront, in fact, of research in COVID antibodies. George, all yours.
Well, thank you, Stalia. And look, I apologize for having to get off early. Something came up that I just have to deal with today. But look, I was born in Lynn, Massachusetts, outside of Boston, from a Greek immigrant family. We lived in a neighborhood that was entirely Greek immigrants. We went to a Greek church, of course. And so my first language was Greek, even though I was born in the US. And George Catropoulos, and I have talked about this, he had the same experience. And so I spoke no English until I went to school. And actually, for some reason I don't understand, I didn't even know there was another language. Even though living in the US, I don't think I'd ever heard English, or at least I don't remember ever hearing English. And so I was shocked when I went to school and people were speaking in what seemed to me to be gibberish. And of course, rapidly learned English, and then grew up in the US. And so my Greek became quite rusty, and actually was terminated with the vocabulary of a 5-year-old or 6-year-old. And then, of course, as I got older and began to appreciate, I started to regain some facility in the language. After college, I graduated with a degree in biology. I worked in industry for a couple of years. I became very interested in what was going on in microbiology labs and went back to graduate school. I had a PhD in microbial genetics. Ended up on the faculty at Johns Hopkins, and was having a happy and successful academic career. I was somewhat dissatisfied with academia and the lip service given to improving health that you have to write in your grant applications. And I actually took a sabbatical, went to work for a biotechnology company to start up some technology there to make transgenic animal models of disease, which was at the time new. And I ended up staying there. The research was very high quality. There really was an intent to make drugs, and I found that very satisfying. So I made the transition from academia into biotech. That company existed only for a couple of years after I got there. It was called Bayer, big pharma company. I worked there for a decade in R&D until you recruited me out of there to come to Felix's.
It wasn't easy. It took some effort, but
it did take some effort. And for the Greek community in New York, in Astoria, Queens, is quite an immigrant center for Greek immigrants. It was, and to some extent still is, populated by Greek restaurants, Greek grocery stores. And in that particular neighborhood, Stelios is kind of the godfather. And, Stelios took me out to dinner in a restaurant in Astoria. And we walked into the restaurant, and the waiters there did everything but bend down and kiss his shoes. And we sat at a table, and we had a lovely dinner. At the end of which, Stelios told me that if I didn't come to work at Exelixis, he would probably have me killed. And of course, I knew that was joking, but at least I think he was. And but you know, in that environment, with the Godfather movie having just come out and everything, it was actually quite interesting. So anyway, that was Stelios recruited me out of the big pharma world into the biotech world. It was the best thing I ever did. And we worked together for 14 years at Exelixis. I then went to Biogen as CEO, again with Stelios. And then a few years ago, 2000.
George, if you have one more minute, I'd just love to hear from you. That moment when you're preparing to wind down at Biogen and go to Vir, what were you, obviously you were not thinking COVID specifically, but you must have had an intuition that you wanted something big.
Oh, I wish that, well, here was the thinking, that after Biogen, I thought I had one more thing to do in my career before I stopped working full time. I wanted to give something back to the world. I've been very fortunate in my life and ended up in a really good place. And there are so serious infectious diseases around the world with hundreds of millions of people suffering. There is inadequate effort being put towards infectious diseases in industry. You know, there are some bigger companies working on infectious diseases, Regeneron, being the leading example, J&J, and Roche, a couple of the big pharma companies have activity, but relative to the need, there is very little activity. In the biotech industry, among startup companies, there are very few focused on infectious diseases, and those that exist are underfunded, narrowly focused. And so the opportunity to participate in a new biotech company focused on infectious diseases that could raise a lot of money, did not have to be narrowly focused, to attract really good people, and hopefully bring drugs to the market that would benefit so many people around the world with an incredible traction. And so that's why I came. We are taking largely immune mechanism approach to infectious disease. The antibody programs that we have are one way of that, but we have many others that we're tackling as well. So that was the reason why I came to Vir, to really be able to hopefully bring some relief to so many people around the world who suffer needlessly from infectious disease.
Excellent. George, I know you got to run.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm so sorry, but I do have to run.
The work comes first, and it's.
Thank you, Claire.
Certainly, it's not overstating the obvious here. It is important work. So thank you. I'd love to turn to the other George, the younger George, because I've met the other George back in the late 80s. I don't know if you remember, but your best buddy from college, Tom, was my medical student at NYU. And that's how we came to start talking. And then, of course, I tried the same ploy with this George, took him to Astoria, took him to dinner, tried to recruit him to come into the company, but that didn't work. So he stayed on at Regeneron and built this incredible company. So George, give us a little bit of the history of how you decided, how did you meet Len, your co-founder? How did you guys come around to thinking about Regeneron? And then I'll keep on asking questions, and Nick can do the same. It's not a monopoly on my part.
Well, first, if you can let me, listening to the other George's story, it's just so typical. I'm sure thousands and thousands of Greek immigrants have exactly the same story. My parents came both from northern Greece, from Kastoria. Their education was interrupted by First World War II, and then the Civil War and the associated catastrophe. And so in the 50s, they came to America. They actually came to Astoria, Queens, with a whole bunch of other Greeks. They were poor. but very hardworking, and their top priority was to reunite the family. So my father worked tirelessly to bring the grandparents and the siblings all over, and we all lived together. And just like George, those of you who might know what Astoria was like in the 60s, it was entirely Greek. When I was entirely raised Greek, I have to say the biggest influence in my life was the stories that my parents and my grandparents told me about the ancient Greek heroes and mythological heroes. And though we were poor and we didn't have anything, their job, it seems to me, was to convince me that I had heroic Greek blood flowing through me, and that because my ancestors did it, and because, like all other Northern Greeks, I was a direct lineal descendant of Alexander the Great, that I could become great too, and I could do anything.
I use that one too, by the way, the Alexander the Great bit. I'm with you.
All Northern Greeks, we're all direct descendants. But if you believe it, you will do it. I totally believe it. But like George, I also went to school not knowing. It's the same exact story, and people don't believe me. But hearing George tells it makes me believe, my own story, because I'm beginning to doubt it. I didn't know English existed. Back then, they didn't have programs like English as a second language or anything like that. I was put in what they call the MR class. It's not politically correct nowadays to say it, but MR stood for mentally retarded. I didn't speak the language. I couldn't understand what was going on. Unlike George, I did not learn English very quickly. It took me 3 years. It was until second grade, halfway through second grade, that they took me out of the MR class. But despite that, like I said, it was my parents' belief, their stories, and my grandparents about the Greeks, that we built this planet. We did everything that was so fundamental to all knowledge that I could do something great. And to fast forward, they did make me study a lot. They made me, if I brought anything less than 100 home, I was a disappointment to them. And it was their drive that became my drive. And the thing that really changed my life was when I was in high school, I fell in love with science. I ended up going, there's a great public school in New York called the Bronx High School of Science. I ended up going to that. And I came home one day and I told my father that I wanted to become a scientist. My father was disappointed because even he knew, he didn't even finish high school, but he knew that scientists did not make a lot of money. And his whole goal was to come to America, to elevate the family, and elevate our resources so we can eventually go back to Greece. Actually, that was the dream. So when I said I was going to become a scientist, he was very, very disappointed. The next day, and this is an unbelievable story to me that he did this, he cut out an article from the Ethnikos Desk, a Greek newspaper, and he said, well, if you're going to become a scientist, don't become like any scientist. Become like this scientist. And there was an article from the Greek newspaper in 1975 talking about a great Greek that we all know, Roy Vagelos, who was leaving academia to go to Merck. That was what the article was about. He said, I don't want you to toil away in laboratories and universities. I want you to follow this role model, become like Roy Vagelos, go into industry, do something really big. And for those of us who were here those days, Roy was a hero not only to the Greeks in America, but to all Americans. He was the top CEO in America 10 years in a row when he was elevated from head of research at Merck to CEO. And he was really an icon. And my father would cut out every single article. I have a portfolio of Roy Vagelos articles, and he kept telling me, be like this man, be like Roy Vagelos. So I consider myself the luckiest man in the world that I had my father somehow have the insight to give me such a great role model. And I'm also incredibly lucky. It's hard to explain how it all happened, but
as many of you may know, Roy, when he left Merck, he became the chairman of our company at Regeneron. I've been lucky enough to work with him now for more than 25 years. He continues to be the most amazing man that I know, and an incredible role model that I think many of us in the industry were inspired by and follow. I think we all went to a dinner last year, I think just before COVID broke out, where so many of us talked about how Roy really was our hero that I think brought so many Greeks into our industry. So that was really, my inspiration. I mean, coming from my family, my roots, the focus on education, the belief that because I'm Greek, I could do anything. I could be a hero. And then at the most crucial time when I decided to go into the science, my father telling me, don't become like any other scientist, become like, Roy Vagelos. So I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I think that, I owe it all to my roots, and I owe it all to, how I was raised. And like I said, like George Skangos we just heard about, and like I think thousands and thousands of Greeks, and particularly Greeks in our industry, we all have very much the same story. And it all starts with where we came from.
Fascinating. Look, this is interesting because, as you pointed out, you and George have quite similar stories in terms of the general guiding principles, not necessarily the details. And I wonder, and I want to turn to Nick for a moment, I wonder whether there's a different Greek-American experience versus the Greek experience, because Nick and I were both born in Greece and then emigrated later. So, I mean, I can recite your career, Anatolia, MIT, Harvard, Sibagagi, Excel, Venrock, Millennium, MPM, Claris, Blackstone. I got it, right?
Yeah, very good. That's very good.
But just give us a little bit the beginnings of it all, and in fact, to what extent your life experience is similar or different to what George and George described. And I'll reciprocate at the end. I'll give you my short version of my story.
No, that's great. Thank you, Stelio. And it's a little bit different. It's quite different actually from the beginning, but quite similar towards the end. I was born in Athens, grew up in Thessaloniki. As a matter of fact, Stelios' uncle was a teacher of mine in high school in Thessaloniki.
See, what related here, George?
And the northern Greece part, the theme kind of comes about. My mother was a physician, and my father was a businessman. And my mother was one of the first women to graduate from Harvard Medical School, having trained initially in Athens. So the talk at home was medicine and business. And I grew up thinking that I was going to become a doctor, except for one little detail. I hated the sight of blood. So but I really liked there's an inherent attraction of helping people and do it in a way that is transformational for their lives. And medicine and pharmaceuticals is a great tool to that end. It's a great thing to be able to do. So I learned chemistry, and I ended up I came to the States, went to MIT, got a PhD in chemistry at Harvard Medical School, did some research, joined the pharmaceutical industry. But at the end of the day, I guess I ended up at the business of science, as opposed to just the science for the sake of science. And I was trying to find different ways of doing that. And one is to work for a pharmaceutical company. And that's where Stelios and I met when I was a researcher at Sibagagi, which is now called Novartis. And 30 years ago, I had to make a very important career decision. Should I stay in research and take a career like the two Georges and go in that direction, or do something different? And purely coincidentally, I remember getting a call right about that time from a member of the board of directors of Sibagagi saying, do you want to leave the lab for a year and work for a venture capital firm in San Francisco? At the time, I was in the New Jersey area. And my kids were very small, so I thought, well, why not? Have a change of scenery for a year. My boss is whatever, 8,000 miles away. That sounds like a pretty good thing. And they said the reason that we want you to do it, there's this thing called biotechnology that's going on, especially in California, and go figure out what that is. And if that's interesting, come back and build it at SIBA. So I did that for a year, but it's very seductive to innovate. It's just very seductive. And when you're in a small company, a small environment, enable great entrepreneurs to build exciting businesses, it's much, much more exhilarating than working for a large pharmaceutical company, no matter how innovative they are. So for the past 30 years, I became an investor, initially with the Rockefeller family, a place called Venrock in New York, the oldest venture capital firm, another organization called MPM Capital, and then started my own firm about 17 years ago called Claris, that a couple of years ago Blackstone acquired, and now I'm running the global business in life sciences at Blackstone, which is really, really exciting. Is again the same theme, enabling entrepreneurs, enabling important products to reach patients that need these products. And before I conclude on this part, I wanted to go back to something that George said, and this is funny about Roy Vagelos. When I was about 17 or 18, my mother came one day and showed me, okay, you don't want to become a doctor. And there was a clip from Kathimerini about Roy Vagelos. And I remember, I know I have it somewhere. And he said, become like that guy. He is a great person, and he was born in Smyrna. He was a prosophagus, and my mother was a prosophagus as well, from Constantinople. So it's funny how both motivation, ambition, circumstances, but also role models have a fundamental way of shaping our lives. But at the end, we all ended up at the same place. You guys are practicing science, we're funding science, but we're all in the business of taking important medicines to patients to make a difference.
Exactly. Well, look, let me quickly reciprocate. I guess my story is probably more similar to Nick's than George's. I was born in Thessaloniki. In fact, I don't want to offend anybody, but I think of myself first as someone from Thessaloniki and then as a Greek, because I have enormous affection for the city where I was born and raised. I was there until I was 18. I went to the 5th high school. I lived in Harilao. I just did all the usual things Greek boys do at that time. And as prescribed by social pressures, I took the exams for the university to go to the Metsovium Polytechnio in Athens to become an electrical engineer, because that was almost like an assurance of a civil servant type job. I mean, you could get a job afterwards with a power company and wear a white shirt and a tie and go to the office and sign your name on a few papers, and you get paid a lot of money. And that was the dream of every Greek mother. But for one thing, and I got in and I started. I just didn't want to be an engineer. I wanted to be a research scientist, and I wanted to be in America. I had this vision of this country as a limitless opportunity. So lucky for me, I found a little scholarship. I came to the US. They put me in some small college in the middle of nowhere. I studied physics and mathematics, and then I went to graduate school, and I shifted gradually to structural biology and biophysics. And I got my PhD from New York University in 1980. And literally, as I was debating whether to stay on at NYU Medical Center in the cell biology department or go to Brandeis and do a postdoc with my Southeast advisor, the initial public offering of Genentech took place. And I saw another little piece of paper. It's always a little clip from a newspaper. Somebody had pinned in the bulletin board in a lab, and people animatedly were just hovering about and around, talking about this great event. And it hit me and said, science, business coming together. And I was crafty. I had to survive in the US as an immigrant. I had no money. My parents couldn't send me any money. I did all sorts of odd jobs, from restaurants to taxi cabs to whatever would make sense to make a living. So I was not afraid to be in business. In fact, I even liked transacting, to be honest, but I also loved science. And I got right there, then I got the idea I should become part of this interface of science and commerce. Then I went on and on from there. I went to business school and I got an MBA. I went to Wall Street as a biotech analyst. I became an investment banker. And I thought investment bankers were largely selling hot air because they spoke often authoritatively about things they knew nothing about. So I thought maybe I should just challenge myself with taking risk on ideas of my own and with my own money and see what it's like. And in a seminal sort of event in 1991, I met Spiros Artavanis, who was then a professor at Yale, had an idea about starting a company. The company ultimately was called Exelixis. We co-founded that company. We recruited the other George, as you heard, threatening to kill him and his whole family. And I started a number of other companies along the way. And I became increasingly involved in all aspects, of the space. But as Nick pointed out, it's really, the common theme at the end of the day is improving the human condition. Can we make drugs to prevent death, to limit pain, to improve quality of life? And that's what we all committed to. And by the way, one point I would make before I turn to George again, this kid was in the MR class in the first grade. I've said publicly for the last 20 years, George Yankopoulos is the smartest R&D director in all of industry, small and large company aside, second to none, without any doubt whatsoever. So your improvement has been rather dramatic, I would say, over the last few years. But anyway, tell me, I want to hear a little bit. First, what gave you the idea, you and Len, to start Regeneron as a neuroscience company? When did you decide to shift area of focus away from neuroscience? Tell me about the mouse. Tell me about, the seminal events along the way that led to Regeneron being what it is today, which is a remarkably successful company.
Yeah, certainly it's a long story. Just to give out some of the highlights. I was at Columbia. I was working in molecular immunology with an incredible mentor, Fred Alt, who's like an older brother to me. I had a lot of ideas, and I was very interested in biotech. But then I met this fellow, Len Schleifer, and he was very passionate. He was a neurologist, and he unfortunately had a situation where his own son was suffering from a congenital abnormality, lack of growth of certain parts of his brain. And so he had the idea, why can't we figure out how to get growth factors for the brain to grow the parts of the brain that aren't growing? He was a neurologist. He was frustrated, but he had nothing to give his own son. And he couldn't do, back then, the late 80s, he hadn't been trained. He didn't know how to clone genes and all this, but his big idea was, let's clone genes for growth factors in the brain. They must exist. Back in those days, some of the early biotech companies like Amgen were focused on growth factors for immunologic factors, such as erythropoietin and so forth. And so his idea was there must be brain growth factors. And so I immediately became interested in that idea. I liked Len from the beginning. The interesting thing is my dad, I was a young guy. I was still in my mid-20s. And my dad insisted that he meet Len. So my dad, with no high school or college education, one of my first dinners was in Astoria with Len. And my dad is interviewing Len about whether he thinks he should allow me, his son, his biggest asset, his son, to go join up with Len. But as we know, the Greeks and the Jews, very similar. My father, took a liking to Len, so he allowed it to happen. And I joined up with Len, and we started the company. And we were very successful scientifically. We were the first to clone a bunch of these nerve growth factors. The science was very exciting. What we were able to do was very exciting. But we were so young and we were so inexperienced. We didn't understand the whole process. And our first series of clinical trials all failed. And the company was in danger of going under. And it was right around that time that I started thinking about what I had been doing with Fred Alt back at Columbia, and that I was thinking that it might be a great new approach to consider overall in industry. And you know, it was a big thing for our company. There was some resistance because how are we all of a sudden going to shift gears and go into a different area? But through a variety of, you know, you need luck in this world, through a variety of good ideas, but also luck and so forth, we were able to go back to essentially my roots. I was, together with Fred, we were the first to propose genetically humanizing the immune system of a mouse, to use the mouse to make fully human antibodies. And there had been a small number of companies that were started actually with my mentor, Fred Alt, as a scientific advisor to actually do that. But we also started collaborating with my mentor, and we had some new ideas. We had new ideas about how to make it. And what took probably about 10 or 15 years, but it seems now, looking back and like almost overnight, we were able to pivot and we became now leaders in this field of antibodies, where I think most people think we are, in fact, in terms of making human antibodies against important disease targets, whether it's for heart disease, allergy and asthma, or now COVID. We've developed the technologies to do it. And interestingly enough, you know, you just can't get away from it. You know, Greeks attract Greeks. As you know, Stelio, some of our top people working in this area who helped develop this technology that, you know, I started us developing it, but then we needed new young blood. Were some Greek guys, most notably this other guy from Kozani, which is right near Kastoria, Christos Kyratsous. And he's really made an incredible name for himself because he's now used our mice. He came up with the first FDA-approved treatment for Ebola, which was an antibody cocktail. And now he's done it again for COVID, where he's come up with a cocktail there. So it's like a pay it forward sort of thing. By the way, Christos went to the University of Thessaloniki. And I should also say that I also went for a semester to the University of Thessaloniki.
Tell us what you were studying there. It's interesting.
Yes, I was interested in archaeology. And so I had the opportunity to go to Pella and, you know, study my ancient ancestors and their roots. And so I was very obviously enamored of, you know, the Philip of Macedon and Alexander and so forth. And that's what I was actually studying when I was there. But yeah, so it's an incredible story of having some good ideas, but also attracting great people. And it's incredible how the Greek thread just runs through it, whether it be the fact that we were able to recruit Roy Vagelos, my original hero, Nick's original hero, everybody's original hero, to our chairman, to now we have the next generation of great Greek immigrants also helping drive everything that we're doing.
Yeah, George referred to before to a dinner in New York, not much, a couple of years ago probably. It was actually a dinner we organized to celebrate the naming of Albert Bourla as CEO of Pfizer. And for those, well, by now he's very well known in Greece. Albert was born in Thessaloniki and, you know, emigrated ultimately through Pfizer to the US. So we were in a room, I'd say there were about 40 of us from all parts of the country. The only person who couldn't come was Manny Pangalos, the head of R&D at AstraZeneca, because of travel commitments, but everybody else was there. And it was a palpable sense of satisfaction looking around the room at all the people holding important positions in the biopharma space and all happening to be Greek. Of course, Roy was there and he was the celebrated guest other than Albert, and in that he's inspired all of us. There's just no doubt about this whatsoever. Before we run out of time, Nick, just a quick question for you. I think if you look back in your career that evolved from, you know, science, academic science, venture investing, company formation. In between, there was sort of like a company formation part within a company setting. And that was the millennium time. Of all the stuff you've done, where did you find the most intrigue? I read someplace that the one thing you regret is not having invested more in millennium, at the early time. And I'm not sure how accurate that is. Or tell me about the new directions you were envisioning for millennium at a time of the birth of the genomics revolution.
Yeah, I've seen before clips of George Catropoulos and Thermoelectron, and that was an inspiration for me. At Venrock, we're founding investors of Thermoelectron, and I was fascinated by how one can take a core technology and evolve it into multiple businesses. And George and Thermoelectron did that very well. Actually, they did it a little bit too well. At the end, it had to kind of shrink a little bit.
I was a banker to them for a while, so I know it well.
So it was an inspiration of, can one use a very transformational technology, genetics, genomics, high throughput sequencing, things of that sort, in multiple areas, in pharmaceuticals, in protein, recombinant proteins, in diagnostics, and in other areas. And that's what we did. So I was really, really excited to do that, and co-founded three companies out of Millennium that spun them out. All three were sold, and one actually ran for a while, and was the inventor of the founding patents. It was chemistry. That's what I know the best, and the idea would be to look at a drug not as a pharmaceutical agent, but as a material that, like silicon, has multiple forms, physical forms, and protect multiple forms. So it was a lot of fun doing that, but the greatest joy was innovation, is going into an area that no one else has gone, and that would be on the scientific side, in terms of creating new space, which is, by the way, now those inventions are used very routinely by every pharmaceutical company for patent protection. And the flip side to that, Celia, is what we're doing today, and innovating on the investment side. So we're the largest private fund in the world in life sciences now, and we more broadly with Blackstone, we cover the entire life sciences space. It's the largest theme of Blackstone last year, committed $16 billion from bench to the bedside. So we have, on the real estate side, we are the second largest landlord of lab space. That's where all the innovation happens. To very important funding, important pharmaceutical products in companies and areas that the two Georges and us are very, very excited about, to CROs and contract research organizations. And even we've invested in a company that now transports and stores vaccines, a company called Cryoport. So it's really exciting to be able to innovate, not only on the science, but also on the investment side. And what drives is it's new, creating something new, exciting, and helping people. At the end of the day, everything that we do in our business is important for the patient.
Nick, before we go to the next point, George Catropoulos was another truly inspirational giant, amongst Greeks of the diaspora in our business. I met him late in his career. What an incredible man, And obviously I worked with his brother John, and as an investment banker at their company. But we got a minute and a half left, so I'll turn to George. You always have insightful, interesting comments to make on COVID, and we haven't touched on COVID at all in this discussion. What are the parting final words as to where we are and what the future holds for all of society with regards to COVID?
Well, I think that we all hope we're turning a corner. I think, frankly, more important than COVID, I think this was hopefully an opportunity to remind the world what Nick was saying, that science, technology, and our industry in particular can really solve the world's problems. And I think that as a society, we have to believe that in order to really allow society and really embrace the science and embrace innovation and support it. so we don't go in the other direction, which is what I've been worried about for a long time. That said, though, we all hope we're turning the corner. We hope the vaccines retain their effectiveness and so forth and so on. This virus has surprised us before. It continues to surprise us. There are now these emerging variants, these variants that are being selected by the immune system, by antibodies themselves, to become resistant to the antibodies that we gain either from natural immunity or from vaccines. So I hope we're putting it behind us, but there is a real possibility that these variants are going to continue to expand, and there will be a continued struggle that we're going to have here that's going to require continued investment in technology and science to try to keep it under control going forward.
Well, the clock shows 0. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and great insight. And once again, thank the organizers for having us join this great meeting today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Stadio.
The favorite part of my day as a founder of this company is obviously talking to customers. I think that's where most of the learning lies. And actually often it's hearing them say no, because I think in hearing no's that shapes much more of the product strategy than maybe, which is much more dangerous. And so even if it's painful, immediately hearing a no, it actually helps us improve and grow.
The happiest memories are moments in time, just like coming back from a deal that's just been closed in London and having a cold beer with my teammates that have worked on it for over a year. Going to our Christmas party every year and seeing the number of people grow, seeing 400 people party and realizing that we've almost created an entirely new community of people. And also, just coming back home after endless travels and sitting with your family and just feeling exhausted, but really happy, really accomplished, relaxed.
I believe that talent is universal, while opportunity is not. This motto has served me pretty well in my venture capital career so far. At General Catalyst, we're in the business of investing in powerful and positive change that endures. We don't care where people come from, how they look like, what they did before. All we care is whether they have the ambition and the ability to go the distance in order to build the category-defining company of their space.
Welcome, everyone. This is our second panel of the day, and we have some amazing guests, most of which I know. I'm fortunate enough to know quite well. So let me just introduce the panel today. Our first panelist is Nikki Trigoni. Nikki is a professor at the University of Oxford at Computer Science. She was also the founder of the Cyber Physical Systems group at Oxford. She's the CTO of Navenio. Navenio is an infrastructure-free indoor positioning solution, and she's quite a remarkable person in her field. She was named CTO of the Year in the UK Women in IT, and also Tech Pioneer in 2020 in the UK. So welcome, Nikki. Fantastic to have you on board. a great mix between academia and entrepreneurship that we much need. Then we have Nikki Goulimis, who I know quite well. We've been to various places, even met in Mexico some time ago. And Nikki has one of the fastest growing fintech, I would say, companies right now, Nova Credit. She co-founded it. Some of its investors are like dream investors for all of us. Actually, one of them is General Catalyst. Nico is just, I can see Nico just sitting behind, underneath Nikki. But she also has Index Ventures. She has Kleiner Perkins, so, you know, the dream sort of list of VCs. And before that, actually, she's done some very interesting stuff, like work for a Ugandan NGO, and also spent some time working in Ethiopia in the Ministry of Agriculture. So not your typical kind of Ivy League, Cambridge, Stanford, which she is, graduate, but a lot more adventurous than that. And then Nico, you know, Nico is quite famous in Greece, and I think this is down to the fact that he's helped countless Greek founders. Now, he's one of the senior people and partners at General Catalyst in San Francisco, and he's made some really famous investments. I mean, most of the names, you know, I think the broad audience wouldn't know. I'm sure they'd know Snapchat, knows Snap, and I think a lot of people would know Livongo, which exited a few months ago. I think the business was exited at 18.5 billion or something like that. And, you know, I think he knows everything about not just unicorns, but decatrons as well. I think that's the new word. And Nico was actually at Stanford which I always think, you know, is really important, because he was a Fulbright scholar. Then moving on to Christos. Christos, to be honest, is a bit of a legend in Greece for the Greek tech ecosystem, because he's one of the very few Greeks that is still very young that has managed to found 5 separate tech companies in his lifetime, whilst at the same time being actually a very accomplished academic and creator of patents. So just to give you a sense, Christos has done, you know, more than most people do in a lifetime. He now runs Acera, and he founded Acera, but before that he had founded Caspida, which was sold to Splunk. Before that, Citas, which was sold to VMware, and before that, Casion Systems, which was sold to EMC. So we're very privileged to have Christos on board this discussion as well. So let me start with a question that is maybe a little controversial, but it's been coming up on some of the comments we've been receiving on our news feed. And the question is this: innovation is supposed to be about thinking outside the box. You know, it's supposed to be about being a rebel. It's supposed to be about challenging convention, and it's supposed to be about diversity. But this new breed of start-upper that has been created out of San Francisco, you know, the guys who drive Teslas and eat a lot of kale and, you know, drink almond milk in their cappuccinos and all that, in fact, come from all over the world, but they seem to behave in a very similar manner. And some people have said they're the new bankers. They just wear hoodies instead of suits and ties. I'll start with Nico. And is that conducive to innovation? Doesn't innovation require diversity, conflict, difference of opinion, some rebellion? Nico, you've been very close to that crowd. What's your take on this?
Look, for the longest time, tech and tech founders were perceived as the underdogs. But the truth of the matter is that actually now, you know, we've made it. We're helping around the world. And if anything, COVID has shown that without tech, we wouldn't be able to communicate with our loved ones, work from afar, be able to educate our kids, or go and see the dog. And I think, you know, tech now is getting, once again, a lucky break, if you prefer, to do things right and do it in a positive way with diversity in mind, and in a way that nobody is left behind. So I view COVID as a golden opportunity to really fix some of the issues and the challenges that you mentioned. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. All the issues you brought up are real. All of us investors, founders, executives have our fair share, of blame as we're recruiting people, investing, etc. But now it's a golden opportunity that Silicon Valley is a mindset to really propel ourselves forward and do it in a way where everybody can partake in this great opportunity to create wealth and change the world to become a better place.
Yeah, and Nikki, Goulimis, I think you're a good example of how the Valley is beginning to look at the emerging world as important. I think most well-funded companies up until now were very focused on solving American problems. And your company is actually solving very real global problems, and especially in emerging markets. And that's certainly a good thing. And it's good for us as well in Greece, because I think the system is decentralizing away from San Francisco. What's your sense? What was your journey like trying to convince top-tier, Silicon Valley firms to invest in a business that basically gives a financial passport to people who haven't ever been banked in the first place, never had a bank account?
I think the American market is massive and remains super important. And so when we were talking to investors, it was a big piece for us to say, look, the US has 15% of migrant flows around the world. We're going to serve this giant population. And look, there are all of these other trends. Globalization is not slowing down. It's only accelerating. 80% of population growth in the OECD is going to be driven by migrants. So I think there is a recognition among our customers, among our investors, that these segments are only growing, and that what might seem like a niche opportunity to start with, someone's vanity project, is actually the key to the future. And that is a massive investment area. The second thing I'll say is that financial services is still so, the space in which I operate is still so limited by country borders. It's something where, your bank operates at a national level. You cannot move your financial identity from one country to another. We're starting to talk now about fintech at a global scale. And I think that's what's really exciting to me as an entrepreneur and thinking about European opportunities and others, is that the regulatory and technology landscape is changing. And so you can now be a fintech company in Greece serving the entirety of the European market, and soon the US market, and the African market, and the Asian market, and beyond, in a way that you couldn't 10 or 15 years ago, because protocols around consumer data, the potential of technological infrastructure has changed so much. And so I think there is just really a moment now for these types of global businesses headquartered anywhere.
Fantastic. I mean, I want to ask Christos a question, I think, on many people's minds, which is, you've been a serial entrepreneur, which is very rare in Greece. And I guess, you have kind of identified a recipe in a way that keeps you going. If you were to, and all that living in the States mostly, right? Although I think you're from Corfu, and I think you're currently in Corfu talking to us. But what do you think are the ingredients that are still missing in Greece, or we should work on to get that kind of ethos going?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things that I can identify. If I look at basically the Greek tech ecosystem today, I would say it's not very mature yet, right? So it's a small set of people that try to build companies, try to kind of push the envelope. They're still the dreamers. It's not mainstream yet. So there's different things we can do to kind of foster the ecosystem. And I would say people is one, right? Making sure that we go from the 2,000 to 3,000 people perhaps might be involved in the current tech space to something much bigger, a lot more volume, whatever volume we can find, because we do have universities, they produce lots of excellent talent. Somehow we need to be able to leverage those things, right? Investors is another important aspect. And I think we do have now investors Now, the investors today in Greece, they are going like from like C to Series A, perhaps. We need to move to a different kind of mode at some point. Let's say looking out maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we need to have investors that invest a lot more money and follow on investments, right? We need to see companies in all stages. I mean, if you see how the ecosystem is today, we still have kind of fairly early on startups perhaps, and maybe some mature companies that are like 10 to 15 years that are running, which is not very kind of common, right? If you look at US standards, like in 50 years, either you made it or you didn't make it. So we haven't seen this like multiple kind of, let's say, pipeline of companies in multiple parts of their lifetime. So that we'll need to see that, right? But I think what is really missing, and I think something to start right now to change, and I see that changing, is the quality and confidence of the tech talent that somehow now they start realizing that they're very capable and they're very seasoned because they start working on companies that either doing the national projects, right, or companies that have in the national market visibility. So that is what we have to foster and continue to push.
And Christo, this is quite a personal question, but what kept you going? I think a lot of people in Europe, it's not just a Greek thing, simply do not have the mentality of serial entrepreneurship. And I think probably the reason is because they don't enjoy it so much that they want to build another one. I think most of them are exhausted by the time they exit, and they say, thank God, I can take a break. What is it, what is it that has kept you going? I mean, obviously you love what you do, but, what is it?
So, right, I mean, for me personally, because everybody would be different, for me it's curiosity, the ability to learn a different field every time, perhaps, right? And I would say a competitive spirit. I want to be able to win every time if possible. Remember, people always think about the last thing that you did, the previous one. So if you fail now, they'll say, oh, this guy failed, right? And I do not want to lose. So, but there are some principles I typically follow. And the first principle I follow is I need to do something in a space that I've not done before. Otherwise, I won't learn, right? So that's number one. Now, that also means that you feel you don't feel very comfortable with a new area because somehow you have to learn the space, you have to accelerate knowledge and so on and so forth. But at least that gives me the learning potential, right? A very high learning potential if possible. Has to be a wide space, a huge space possible. You cannot go against the trends. If everybody's doing now AI, you cannot discount AI. Somehow it needs to be in the mix, or it cannot be against that current. You cannot bet against AI, for example, right? For me also personally, I want to do it with a new team every time, so that at least I can get to, I don't basically have the same people, that we have the same ideas and we recycle things, right? And how you build a company like 20 years ago and how you build a company now is totally different. I mean, you can say, yeah, there's some practices that are kind of similar, but I don't think so. I want to also learn how to build a company every time, right? So basically, tagline, if you were to give like a tagline, I personally want to reinvent myself on every time I take the opportunity. Now, yes, it's very frustrating because right, building a company, you have like these phases, and you've been there. So you're gonna have through the same phase again, you have the same frustrations, the same possibilities of failing, by the way. It's not that because you did it, you may not fail. In fact, in many VC circles, if you have done it multiple times, the probability is much higher for you to fail and leave. Because they'll say, why would you actually try again, right? But I think, look, for me, this is what drives me: curiosity and ability to learn every time.
That's a great segue into Nikki Trigoni, because you have done this rare thing of bringing academia and business together, and I think there's this view in Greece that that people end up doing what they have studied at university, even, right? And here's Christos telling us that actually I've never practiced what I was taught at university, and I try to change my domain every time because of intellectual curiosity, but also because it doesn't really matter. you coming from academia, what's your view on this subject of what is it? Because there's a lot of young people watching today, right? And there's this kind of thing, am I bound by the degree I will get in terms of what I will do? Or has the world changed?
It's a very, very good question. Although I have always been focusing on topics around computer science. Even in my career, like Christos said, I really loved change and I really loved the opportunity to explore new topics. And so, say from my undergraduate degree in Greece, in Athens, where I was at the same time, I was working in the bank sector and sort of developing systems for banks. In my PhD, I did something completely different. I worked on sort of object-oriented database systems, which was a hot topic at the time. And then in my postdoc research, I went and worked in a very new area, brand new area called then sensor networks, now IoT or cyber physical systems. Then I love this area, and I kind of stayed and sort of developed different research programs in this area. But we worked in areas like animal monitoring, like environmental monitoring, which are completely different than what I decided to do the venture on, which is indoor positioning and applied to hospitals for better collaboration within hospitals. So even within sort of a career that is, you can sort of classify it roughly computer science, I think it is very, very important to have the tendency, let's say, to explore and sort of go into technology transfer only if you feel that you have identified a topic that is very promising, has sort of scalability potential, market potential, and could have a real impact in many different applications.
And do you enjoy being an entrepreneur after so many years as an academic? Or if you do, what do you like most about it? I mean, what is it that is refreshing, different?
I love it, definitely. I would do the same thing if I was starting again in 2015, and if the company goes well and I have another opportunity for another startup, I will definitely try it again. It is also painful. I'm not going to hide that. So there have been a lot of challenges on the way. But thinking about it, there are a lot of commonalities between being an academic and being an entrepreneur, in the sense that innovation is quite key on both camps. Different types of innovation, but thinking out of the box in general helps on both sides. Finding your own funding. If you want to create a group, an academic group, you need to apply for funding, you need to get funding, then you need to recruit people to work. And a very similar thing happens in a small company, although at a slightly different sort of scale. Also, what really was quite different and challenging is that there's a huge gap between having a new idea, a concept, let's say, something you can prove with a small experiment in the lab and write a paper about, to having a real product. So the gap there is like very, very big. And also the other thing that I've learned in this journey is the importance of making sure you have a good case, like the product has a good fit to the market and there's a good return on investment for the end customer. So these are kind of things that you learn more on when you go into a venture side, like a spin outside rather than academia. But a lot of the properties that you need to have a good career in both are common, and also it gives back. So basically now when I'm looking at sort of blue sky research problems in academia, I can't stop my brain from thinking, okay, what is the real world application as well? Even if it's not in 1 or 2 years, in 5 years from now.
That's wonderful, actually. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Nico, I was recently looking at the numbers. Greece has a total market cap in terms of tech companies about 4 billion. Out of only a few companies, let's be frank. It's like 5, 6 companies make that valuation. And then I was looking at a recent report that had funding, but then I looked at valuations, and it looks like companies founded by Greeks or people of Greek descent actually have a market cap of over 40 billion. If you look at almost exclusively the US. How can these two worlds interact? because you've been doing it yourself. And Innovative Greeks will aim to do a lot more of that. So, it'd be great if you could share ideas. How can we sort of take more advantage of this amazing ecosystem of Greeks abroad?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, here I only see a lot of opportunity. So, as you mentioned, now there are a few thousand folks who work here at the fledgling Greek tech startup ecosystem. And I think COVID is a golden opportunity. So Innovative Greeks can really help contribute here. So all of us who live overseas, we can serve as role models and as super connectors. So we're here to inspire and pay it forward. Folks like Nikki who live overseas can lead by example and serve as ambassadors at large of all things Greekness for our international friends. Innovative Greeks can create the face map of all Greeks in tech. As you, Marco, said in your introduction today, that's something that does not exist, right? So when you have that face map of all Greeks in tech, there are many modes of contribution depending on somebody's expertise, availability, connectivity, and net worth. So, for example, somebody can invest in Greek funds. And this could be a easy, and passive way to do it if you have capital. Mm-hmm. You can mentor an aspiring young founder who can come your way. Can you help recruit talent for a Greek startup because one of your international friends wants to join or want or live in Greece? Can you sponsor a visa if you're somebody who has a company overseas and you can hire your own Greek? So hire your own Greek, and sponsor her his visa. Of course, as Nikki was saying, starting a company is a journey and it has a lot of ups and downs. So individuals who've been there and done that can serve as emotional support. And if you work for one of the big acquirers, like some of the folks in the previous panel, you can always acquire a startup, like from Greece. And this could be like a great way for funds like the Greek VC funds to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And make Greece a success. So I think all of us here, we got to make sure that we can join forces together, realize that we're members of the same team, like the same way when we support the Greek national basketball team, and cheer on each other. So if we change our mindset and cheer on each other, I only believe the best is yet to come, as one of my smart partners at GC says.
Yeah, I agree with you. I said in my opening kind of remarks, I think, the two curses that have hounded Greece are sort of the sort of inability to work as a team. We're a very individualistic place, and the other, of course, is cutting corners, not doing, using our inventiveness in the wrong direction. So, Nikki Goulimis, I wanted to ask something because you're in a particular vantage point of having grown up and worked, not worked, but studied in the UK, and then you really made your career in the US. And to be frank, it's quite kind of shocking how behind Europe still is in terms of innovation and the tech ecosystem compared to the US. And I'm not singling out Greece, I'm saying Europe. Why do you think that is the case?
Gosh, that's a hard question, and thank you for saying that I've made my career. I'll be writing that down and cheering it. I think it comes down to some of the factors that we've talked about before. I think it comes down to money. What is the venture capital ecosystem? What is the opportunity? And just to be extremely clear of how fortunate I've been, we raised $3.6 million in our seed round with no product and a deck. And so the sort of risk-adjusted money that is willing to invest in that way, but also is willing to be patient. I'll add that we've now raised $70 million of funding, but we've done so probably not quite hitting some of the long-term sort of revenue multiples straight away, but more in a way that we're building long-term infrastructure and people see that investment. So there's a strong match between our business model and the type of capital that's willing to invest.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
is it a cultural thing? I think, my experience has been you ask a European investor for comments and they come up with all the flaws. Their immediate reaction, the immediate reaction is, well, no, you can't. And then a lot of the US culture is very risk friendly, very sort of, I guess, like Obama said, yes, we can. There's a can-do sort of optimistic view of the world. The European view tends to be very sort of guarded, very, very sort of defensive. Have you found that to be the case?
I mean, I think there is a cultural comfort with risk-taking and with just like more individualism in the US. It is about me against the system. It is not about how do I operate within a system. And I think that has benefits, and I think that has downsides too. I think it has benefits in terms of it fosters more innovation, but I think a lot of times the innovation isn't structural enough, and so there may be potential, with more of to blend the two perspectives and to create innovation that plays at a structural level. Again, I'm still thinking about financial services where, in my industry, it takes a village and it takes an ecosystem. And so, yes, you can build a great challenger bank, but that actually isn't that valuable unless you're able to build something that partners with everyone else and there's and it's able to achieve an escape velocity. But yes, I think there is just a comfort with investment in the States that I think is coming to Europe. I think we see more and more funds expanding to Europe. So, Sequoia most recently, Lightspeed in the UK. There's just more and more of that money and that mindset entering. But I would say a word of caution, and I'm not sure if Nico would agree with me, but sometimes I think there's this question of like, in our excitement with innovation and entrepreneurship, suddenly every business gets treated like it should be VC backable. I don't really understand why coffee companies are suddenly becoming venture capital businesses and others. And I worry that that's actually negative for the ecosystem because those companies won't perform, and venture capital as an asset class has 0% return on average. So obviously, Nico is vastly outperforming that, and funds like General Catalyst outperform that. But I would say that I'm excited for more venture capital to enter Greece and Europe more broadly. I think it's going to foster a lot more innovation. I think there is a cultural mindset that's happening and shifting. I look at my Stanford GSB education where they sort of, they were like, here is the discipline and the playbook for how you find a startup. And so, there's definitely a lot that's teachable, not just luck. And so I think we can build that discipline. But I also think there are a lot of spectrums on which innovation and entrepreneurship occurs. And I think we might be looking a little too narrowly at one type and trying to apply that same model everywhere where it might not always fit. And there's so much more that we could be doing.
And Christo, I was listening to one of your sort of other panel discussions some time ago with Endeavor, and you mentioned a very interesting conversation with Konstantinos Venitsanopoulos from Arecto, and you were sort of talking about how you had to sort of almost slightly rewire his brain and his ambition in terms of taking that bet, making that leap. Could you share with us sort of your experience with Greek founders who timidly maybe come to the US for the first time trying to break into that market? I mean, what's missing and what are the things you're encouraging them to do more of?
And I think the one with Konstantinos is a good story, and I think it's a successful story, but I've seen also the other stories too. For this particular one and many such stories, so imagine two capable guys work at the university project, they have a nice salary, everything is fine, live in Athens, life is good. All of a sudden, you see that they have something, right? They want to start something on their own, but they don't want to leave the job. So what do you do? Somehow I have to convince them that if you want to just pursue your kind of idea, you have to just leave your comfortable job and with a good salary and everything. So it's not very standard for somebody to go and quit, at least in Greece, at the time. Maybe now it is. So okay, and these guys took the risk. These guys really literally took the risk. Okay, they left their position. They started basically building something. They reached out to me and other people. We basically introduced them to people in the US. Both technical people and VC, at the same time. But I think eventually they kind of got some money to start, which is good. The difficult part, I think, for that company and other companies became after they start the company. Became when they try to find the actual product market fit. I mean, what do they have to find? What do they have to sell for the US market? So it took them quite a bit of time. And they had lots of frustration, but at the end they made it. I think what actually made it for them is perseverance. They managed to continue risking, but continue pushing the envelope, continue building the team, and because they moved to the Bay Area, they start looking around. And for those of you who haven't been in the Bay Area, if you go and there's some standard places, some coffee places and some dinner places that people go, and like everybody's talking about technology in every kind of table. And sometimes you try to start a company and there's your competition is just next to you. So obviously they pretty much got what it takes to pivot and find the right product market fit. And they found it there, and then they actually got more money and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
But there's other stories too that, and I have a story like, I think early on, maybe 2000, now there's this company, I'm not gonna basically say the name, but this company that basically these guys had very good technology. And the two founders did not align. And one guy wanted to go all the way, the other guy did not go, want to stay in Greece. And you see that basically they lost an opportunity to build something extremely good, something extremely big, like Google Maps. I mean, like I could just see it, and these guys could not basically see it, or I mean, one of the guys could not see it. So, I mean, you have both cases, right? And but I think lately I can see people taking the risk, even though founders typically don't take risks. Most of the time, everybody believes that founders take risks. I don't think they take risks. Who takes risk is the people that join the founders later on, perhaps, and they believe that that's a great idea. Somehow you have to convince them. I mean, like, what is the risk? At the end of the day, as I mentioned in the beginning, you get to learn lots of things. So you'll never take a risk by learning more things, right? You always invest in yourself, even if you basically fail.
No, you're so right. I mean, I think a lot of people think that the founders are the protagonists. In reality, the people who are giving up, careers or, the opportunity cost of even, building a family with steady income, etc. These are people who are probably taking even more risk. And finally, I want to ask everyone, and we can have like a discussion about this, starting with Nikki Trigoni. COVID, right? I mean, in Greece, as usual, we exaggerate, okay? And I think there are a lot of people that are saying COVID is going to change Greece, it's going to save Greece, because loads of people are going to come back. Reality is, to be frank, that a lot of people have come back. And they have come back because it's a nice place to be, but I also know quite a few people that have come back because of also the more favorable tax, sort of non-domicile tax status that has been put in place, which is similar to what has existed for years in the UK. Nikki, what do you make out of the COVID opportunity for Greece?
Yes, obviously COVID has a huge impact on healthcare and obviously on financial sort of situation in Greece. However, I think it could be also a blessing in disguise. The blessing is that now with COVID, the mode of work has changed significantly. So we all work online. It doesn't matter where you are. So if you are in the UK, if you are in Athens, or if you are in the US, it's exactly the same thing. So the opportunity that this creates is that companies that had their bases elsewhere, not in Greece, could move some of the business or could expand some of the business in Greece, could sort of find really good human capital in Greece. And the whole company could continue to work as if it was in one place, if we like. And I have experienced that firsthand. Like, we have just started with great help from Big Pie, an initiative to create a branch in Greece, and have started hiring the first people. And Dimitris, who's one of our first people, is working on a new product alongside people that are based in the UK. And there's actually no difference whatsoever where they are. And the same for sort of entrepreneurs that are in anywhere in Europe or in the US or in Asia, and they have the dream to come back to Greece. It's now much, much easier to set up companies that have some basis in Greece, but also can get sort of human capital from abroad and expertise as needed. So it creates a much more flexible situation, which is very positive for Greece. And I think we can definitely capitalize on that.
Nico, you yourself have come back. You know, you've been here for quite a while, and we've had the pleasure of seeing you more often, face to face. But what's your experience like? I mean, you've done it.
Yeah, so we've been here temporarily, and it's been a blessing indeed, as Nikki was mentioning. It's fantastic to spend obviously more time with family in the summer, have the opportunity to enjoy the Greek summer, and also pay it forward with spending more time with the local tech startup ecosystem. Obviously, my wife and I are not, unfortunately or fortunately, moving back to Greece right now, but a lot of our peers from Silicon Valley and other places in the tech ecosystem now are seriously considering to move back. And this, in my mind, is great news for the local talent.
And Nico, let me ask you, say in a post-COVID world, do you think you will be spending more time here?
Certainly. I think till a couple of years ago, when I was telling my partners at GC that I need to take 3 weeks off and be in the Greek islands, they were like looking at me, what were you thinking? Now if I were to say to them, well, I'll be in Greece over the summer for a couple of months and working from here, nobody, will be saying anything. The other thing is that our firm has aspirations to do a lot more in Europe. We've been very active over the last 4 years, and the European tech startup scene is catching up. Like, the ambition is coming to be almost as high as Silicon Valley level. So, of course, anybody who is greed-oriented and wants to make a change, Europe is becoming a hotbed of innovation.
And Christo, do you think we've crossed that border now through COVID where trust has been established? Meaning, you've been doing this way before COVID, and I think a lot of technology companies, but for other companies, just trusting that a person working from home can be as productive, if not more productive, than, hitting a card and going into an office. Do you think that's happening now? Because it could be very liberating, I think, for everyone.
But no, I cannot say that it's going to be more productive, by the way. I think it's going to be less productive. But irrespective of that, I think the issue is not whether you're going to be more or less productive. The interesting thing here is that this crisis, like either crisis in the past, they're going to help a country. The dot-com and 2008 crisis helped India and China. Thousands of people left Valley and they went to their countries and they built the local tech ecosystem. So COVID is going to actually help the Greek ecosystem. So I definitely believe that. And the thing is, as an example, take my company. And all the companies I've done so far, I never worked with people in Greece. It's the first time we're investing in people in Greece. So, clearly remote working is feasible. It's working. All the companies are embracing that. This is basically the new norm now.
And from a personal point of view, are you happier now spending a little more time than you used to in Corfu?
Yes, I think, of course.
Of course.
I think, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't compare, right? If you can actually have that ability, why not?
Excellent. So, Nikki, I'll finish with you. You've never actually lived in Greece, but you do love Greece and you do come here a lot. Your dad, in fact, sold his company and he's invested in a Greek team here, building stuff. What's your sense of COVID? And we'll end with your short comment because we have only a few seconds left.
I think I'll reiterate what everyone else said. I think it is I'm seeing many friends returning to Greece or contemplating returning to Greece, or at least spending more time. And so I think it's incumbent on all of those people to think about how do we not just take from the Greek economy, but and just enjoy its beauty and an amazing climate and history and all of those other things, but how do we actually contribute? And I have to admit that I'm a little humbled today, just hearing the list of number of ways to contribute and thinking of how low a score I have on some of those. And so I'm excited to do more. And I just think that the fact that this conference is happening is awesome. Like, we are all in different places. There are thousands of people here. There's friends, people from different walks of life. This is incredible, and I don't think we could have done this in the same way a year ago, and I'm super grateful to the organizers for putting it together.
I totally agree, totally agree.
And then, you know, my other plug will be, like, I think obviously COVID is a huge economic and health crisis for millions of people, and we can't forget that. Out of any crisis, there is opportunity, and I think you know, in financial services, there's new digitalization, new opportunities from that. I think there is a whole new generation of people who've come online, and I'm so excited for some of the products that are being made, targeting, you know, the silver generation and others who maybe previously we couldn't reach. So I think this is the time to start a company for people who are watching.
With that, I think, you know, everybody agrees COVID is an opportunity for Greece. And I can assure you, Nikki, and the thousands of others, you know, watching us and living abroad, that one of the things Innovative Greece will do, often in an annoying way, is nudge you and nudge you again to help us out, give back. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Many, many thanks.
Στα θετικά της Ελλάδας, η ικανότητα και η αυθεντικότητα.
We're intelligent and ambitious. And while we're driven to some extent by economic success and glory, for the most part, we do it out of a sense of pride, for the accomplishment, to make our parents and families proud, and to prove that Greeks can and do excel at whatever they put their minds to.
Greece means family, it means continuity, it means beauty, and it means joie de vivre. Greece also means potential.
Good evening. My name is Dinos Kokalis, for the ones who tuned in now, and I am the co-chairman of SEV Innovation Committee and the chairman of Intersoft. I'm happy to moderate such an exceptional group of participants today, and I hope we will manage to give some motivating insights to our audience. The topic of the third panel today is Greeks managing exceptional companies. How can they help the scaling up of the Greek innovation ecosystem? Scaling doesn't mean that new ventures should disavow their startup identities and embrace large company dogma once they're positioned for growth. However, it is important for new entrepreneurs to be prepared to manage growth, learn new ways of operating and effective management structures, hire functional experts, and reinforce the cultural values that will sustain the business. All of this will give them a better chance of making it in the longer term. I would now like to introduce our participants. Dr. Victoria Coleman was the 22nd director of DARPA. She is a senior advisor to the director of CITRIS at the University of Berkeley, has been the CEO of Atlas, a Silicon Valley startup, has worked for Wikipedia and many other successful companies. Hello, Victoria. Mr. Jim Yiannopoulos is the chairman and CEO of Paramount Pictures, one of the largest entertainment companies worldwide. Prior to his position at Paramount, he was managing Fox Entertainment, successfully turning out his hits like Avatar and X-Men, and he's married and a father to 3 daughters and loves spending time in Greece. Hello, Jim. Mr. Dinos or Dean Dakolias, Co-Chief Investment Officer at Fortress Investment Group, one of the leading investment management companies in the world, with approximately $50 billion under management. He serves at the Board of Trustees for Columbia University and is the co-founder of the Hellenic Initiative that supports Greeks all over the world. Mr. Ivan Kotsovinos, Global Head of Infrastructure at American Express. He's one of the best leaders in the areas of virtualization and global computing, cloud computing, And prior to his position at Amex, he worked for Deutsche Telekom and Morgan Stanley. And last, Mr. Panagiotis Vitakis, Chief Customer Officer at Celonis, one of the fastest growing technology companies in the world. Previously, he has worked at Persado and Upstream and has the extensive experience working in companies of Greek origin. Many thanks to all of you for participating and sharing views with us today. Thanks for everything. I will start with Victoria. Victoria, innovation can be a shortcut to economic growth and prosperity. How do you think innovative Greeks from all over the world can help the scaling up of the innovation ecosystem? Based on your experience, what are some key strategic areas that Greece should focus to better foster innovation?
Thank you. Kalimera, everyone. It's a real pleasure, first of all, to be here. I'm humbled by being in the presence of such illustrious company. I am dumbstruck. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts today. So I live in Silicon Valley. I've been here for 25 years. So this is one of the classical innovation hubs, I guess. And it's of course one of many. So if you take almost a scientific look and you look to see what characteristics do all these innovation hubs have in common, certain themes pop up. One of them, perhaps the most obvious one, is that there are one or more strong science and engineering universities nearby. So here next door we have Stanford, across the bay we have Berkeley. There is a significant intellectual kind of critical mass that is both educating students but also discovering new things. As they discover those new things, the other thing that is obviously available here is research funding. So as people come up with ideas in the schools, there is research funding available for them to pursue them. Out of that, then, the third criterion, if you like, the third criteria is looking to see who works in this environment, in this innovation hub. So the talent oftentimes comes from universities in the form of founders, executives, and also engineers. But that's not enough. The other thing that you need, of course, is to have available capital and a strong VC venture capital industry. So here I'm literally 300 yards from Sand Hill Road, the kind of storied venture capital center of the universe. This money allows the innovation hub to continue evolving. Right? It's the lifeline. So these are obvious things, perhaps not so obvious things, that there is a large local ecosystem here of suppliers, of customers, as well as startup infrastructure. When you start a company, you're not going to go hire a lawyer. You can't afford it. You're not going to hire a CFO. You can't afford it. There's infrastructure around that allows you to do these things without having to make the investment in the company. And then, of course, you need access to large markets. So, here in the United States, of course, this is a very large market, so you can grow the company. You need a stable currency. You need a large, diverse labor market to draw from. But, most importantly, I think what you need is a culture of optimism, right? A willingness to take risks and also a willingness to fail. If you look at it from the Greek perspective, I think many of these conditions exist, but not everything is as well developed as it could be. So if you like, if I had to pick my top three for Greece, I'd say, well, things like, flexible regulations, tax regime, and labor laws. I mean, here in the United States, every company incorporates in the state of Delaware. There's a reason for that. Then, capital, really important, and also willingness to take risks. I mean, I think there is culturally in Greece, that's probably one of the obstacles that people have to get over, to try new things. It's not necessarily, the path that everybody chooses to take, but the more examples that we have, of course, the easier it becomes. And that's why I'm so excited, Dinos, about this whole effort of Innovative Greeks, because you can show that there are lots and lots of great examples, and that then gives people hope and opportunity and aspiration themselves. I hope that
it is true. Given the global competition, Greece has, let's say, to perform and give the right incentives for people to, to create the ecosystem all over here. Yeah, thank you, Victoria. I will now turn to Jim and go into a different subject, as my aim is to get insights from our participants in their field of expertise. So, Jim, what factors do global producers consider in the choice of production venues? How can Greece grow its role as a destination for international film and television productions?
Well, first of all, there's nothing I would like more than to be shooting more films in Greece so I can spend more time there. But look, it's an assessment of logistic and financial factors when we or anyone makes a film, and you assess, how do we make this film most efficiently? Distance is not a desirable characteristic. Obviously, we would prefer to have the film as close to us, the production as close to us as possible to monitor it, but occasionally locations, especially incredible locations in Greece, have an appeal. On the other hand, Troy was made in Mexico, and the nature of movies to shoot exteriors in Paris and make the rest of the film thousands of miles away is also possible. So location is one factor. The real factors considered, especially in big budget movies, are the cost benefits, production subsidies. I think many governments around the world, and most recently Greece, including half the states in the US, have recognized that encouraging production activity in their locations creates economic activity, not just in the crews that are hired, the people making the movies, but the restaurants they go to and the hotels and the drivers and all of the related economic activity. So there are production subsidies all over the world now. And Greece has most recently put one together under ECOMEC, and Mr. Koyanis, who oversees that, has been a tremendous help to encourage that. Labor cost is a factor. Greece is competitive, higher than some other countries, Eastern European countries, but still a competitive market. The availability of crews, do we have the necessary employment base in a country? I think Greece is growing in that regard. I think we still have progress to make in terms of heads of departments. Production facilities, where are you going to shoot the film? Are there sound stages? Are they adequate to the size of the film and the production needs? We still have some work to do in Greece, but increasingly people are focused, especially now with the production subsidy in place. Investment is coming and new facilities, and I know a number of people who are exploring production facilities in Greece. And then finally, I guess the facility of the production process. Do you have the ability to close streets, to have permits to shoot in certain locations? And in that regard, the Hellenic Film Commission, Mrs. Vergu, and the Athens Film Office, Mr. Catropoulos, have made a lot of progress in what was previously some difficulty in Greece in terms of assuring the access to locations and the facility to film. In the end, it's a chicken and egg development. The more production is encouraged and made easier, the more happens. The more happens, the more crews develop, and the more facilities and investment infrastructure follows. And that in turn makes the location more appealing and efficient. I think more has been done under the government of Prime Minister Mitsotakis than in many years before. The Ministry of Digital Governance, Mr. Pirakakis, and others in the government have really expanded access in the facility of production. I think the big chance that we have as a country that has so far not fully developed is in the digital sector. It's wonderful to have people who build sets and paint them and carry cameras and lights and do all of those, and that's an employment base that's very important. But film is evolving, and to develop the capabilities of the 21st century, where we do so much production virtually, where we can create any environment. When we made Avatar, for example, people don't realize none of that forest, none of that environment was real, not a single blade of grass. It was all made in a computer. And it was done in a small town in New Zealand, in Wellington, New Zealand, by the preeminent special effects operation in the world called Weta. And so I've encouraged the discussion of the possibility of developing that sector in Greece, because I think that creates a skill set that's beyond and in addition to manual production facilities into the adaptability into other media, into medical technologies and other digital applications from skilled a skilled employee base. So I think that's the next phase, developing a post-production facility, special effects facilities, animation facilities, because that you can do from Hollywood. With a fiber optic connection, you can monitor what's happening in Greece and create employment for a lot of skilled people for the next century. So I think that is an opportunity that we have to pursue in addition to the more traditional production.
Thank you, Jim. Dean, as a global investor, you have great experience in finding funding opportunities throughout the world. What should Greece change to free up capital and create more jobs, in your opinion?
Thank you, Dinos. And I'm like Victoria, I'm humbled to be on this panel. I wish we were all in person in Greece. But hopefully this summer or soon we can get back to some normalcy. But we are obviously primarily a credit kind of distressed-oriented fund. So I may bore you relative to Victoria or Jim in terms of DARPA or film. But two things that I think go hand in hand in Greece that I think this government has done a great job at getting ahead of is the banking system and the legal system. The banking system in Greece obviously has been burdened with a lot of NPLs. I think the first steps have been taken to move those NPLs off balance sheet, to put them into hands of servicers that can really optimize them and create liquidity. But until those loans, those assets are processed, it really doesn't solve the issue. These companies are still burdened in Greece with unsustainable debt. The system needs to be more geared towards resolving, moving those assets through the system, creating liquidity, and also giving those companies the opportunity to really grow and evolve and rehire again. So it's kind of a double-edged kind of sword in many ways that, resolving the banking issue or resolving NPLs off the bank balance sheets is the first step. Dealing with changing the judicial system so that bankruptcy works, pre-bankruptcy works, and those assets can be filtered through and processed is as important, or in fact more important. We talk about access to a lot of entrepreneurs in Greece to venture capital money, but at some point in time, they may need or will need more traditional services, more traditional banking services. And the banks today, while trying, are not fully prepared in a position to provide that liquidity. As I said, the government's done a great job at starting the process, but until a lot of those issues are resolved, really you can't have sustained growth. You can't have full job creation. You can't have sustained growth so we can get back to pre-crisis GDP.
Yeah, it seems that a lot of things need to get done, but we're in a good track, I think. So back to tech now. Ivan, what are the key global trends in technology? What are the main developments you are tracking, and where could Greece help contribute?
Sure. Thanks, Dino. I'm going to talk about three trends. I'll start with the transition to cloud computing. The cloud really had a pivotal moment during the pandemic. Last spring, huge numbers of people around the world suddenly switched to remote working, video conferencing, attending classes virtually, watching streaming video. Here we are, having a virtual conference. None of this would have been possible without cloud computing, which supports most of the services. And so The cloud really proved itself to be effective and scalable more than anyone could have imagined. Now, many industry sectors are already significantly on cloud. Jim mentioned rendering Avatar, for example. Film rendering is a great use case for cloud. Some other industries are a little bit behind, like the financial services. But what you're seeing is broad adoption of cloud across all industry sectors. In addition to the cloud itself, as more and more companies adopt the cloud, they will need to make sure that they have the right security, that they have the right tools to make their systems available in the cloud, and that they can manage their expenses in the cloud. So there's going to be all these ancillary services around the cloud to help make it efficient and effective. So that's one set of trends. The second trend that I will call out is developer agility. The uncertainty of the last year or so and the opportunity as we face the other side of the recovery mean that speed is of the essence. Every company is trying to go faster and capture opportunities. And so the question that companies are trying to answer is how they can make their software developers more productive to be able to go faster and capture those opportunities. And there's a lot of focus on tools and capabilities that drive developer productivity for that reason. The last trend I would like to call out is machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now, there's been a wave of excitement over AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning over the last several years, and quite justifiably so. But these technologies are still hard to use, and data scientists are few and far between. And so there's an evolving market for tools that make AI and machine learning easier to consume, easier to use for data analytics at scale.
Yeah.
There are several more areas like cybersecurity, automation, and several more. Now, in my view, Greece could play in any of these areas, but not all of these areas at the same time. It's going to be important, in my view, that Greece focuses on a smaller number of areas and develops a deep technology ecosystem around those areas, kind of along the lines of what Victoria was saying earlier, rather than going broad and trying to capture everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ivan. Panayoti, what are the key requirements for a technology company to scale up globally? Is it only a matter of the impact of the innovation itself? What do you think?
Thank you, Dino, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. Great to be here with the others. I think innovation is a big part of it, and it starts with actually building a product, a software product that solves a real problem for customers at a global scale. It has to be something that has a big addressable market. I think Victoria mentioned before the US as being a very, very large market. Any Greek company that tries to compete in the tech space really needs to think big. Needs to think about the global market and building a product that solves a real problem that customers around the world have. And the second one, which is very coupled with that, is to have the right go-to-market model that, in terms of how to sell, package it, and promote it, that goes outside of Greece or even Europe in many ways, because that's a very complex environment, and you really want to go after the biggest market in the world in at least enterprise software, which is the US. Undoubtedly, I believe about 50% of spending in the enterprise software space happens in the US. So the only way to do that is to build a model that works in the large software in the software markets as opposed to small local markets. And then the corollary to that is that you have to hire the right people and also be willing to invest to open up these markets. It's extremely expensive to operate in the US, to build a sales force, to build a marketing team, to build a pre-sales team, to build after-sales teams. Super expensive, but you have to do it eventually if you really want to get into the biggest software market in the world, which means that you need to have a big investment up front, right? And be ready to raise money and make that investment. And then the last thing I'll say is that you also have to think about building an ecosystem around the product. It's almost impossible to conquer a market alone. And you got to think about the technology integrations that you can bring, the reselling agreements that you can structure with key players in the market, and with system integrators that will really help you accelerate and get to the places that any company on its own cannot get to. You cannot get to all the markets, you cannot get to all the customers, and even if you get to, you cannot serve all of them. You need partners, you need ways to expand your footprint, and you need a model that brings together the entire ecosystem rather than a standalone solution which has its limits. So if you put all that together, then you have a very competitive proposition, a compelling proposition to go to market.
Thank you, Panagiotis. Victoria, I'm moving again into a new subject. We all know how DARPA has shaped transformational change in the military capabilities of the US, and not only. Greek defense capabilities should be technologically rethought with the aim to keep our country safe and operationally strong. The defense industry is thought to be quite secretive and confined. However, I am reading that you have an aggressive vision for practically bringing closer the defense research with the innovation ecosystem. Can you let us know the steps that you have in mind for having the defense industry open up and practically engage with the disrupting innovation activism of the world? Do you believe that this plan is applicable for Greece as well, either as an innovation ecosystem that could directly participate in your plan, or as the Greek defense sector in initiating an innovation engagement plan like the one you have in mind?
Thank you, thank you. This is a great question and very close to the heart. So, you know, it's undoubtedly the case that when it comes to defense and national security, there are many things that require that technology should be protected. This means that many technologies and systems will have to be developed by specialist companies in secure environments. However, the defense science and technology enterprise must also open its doors to the private sector, including non-traditional performers. This is something that I have been very vocal about, you know, before DARPA, at DARPA, and I continue to be very vocal about it, for example, in testimony in House of Representatives last week. So that includes listening to and learning from commercial best practices, as well as leveraging dual-use technologies, such as cloud communications, enterprise software, you know, the things that my colleagues here on the panel have already spoken about. It also means that we in the defense sector should encourage the formation of new companies with innovative ideas that can prove out and mature technologies that we can then acquire from them to train and equip our men and women in uniform. So, for example, at DARPA, one of the things that we did while I was there was to take some funds away from the Small Business Research Innovation Fund and create a national security seed fund to allow small companies, to encourage small companies to form around ideas and breakthroughs that our programs were making. Now, you know, if you shift the lens to Greece for a moment, and this may surprise the audience or my fellow panelists here, but Greece is actually making very significant investments in its national security and defense. Greece is the country that spends the highest amount of money in NATO for its defense as a percentage of its GDP, after only the United States. So it's only one of the 5 countries in NATO that spend above 2%. In 2019, for example, the World Bank reports that Greece spent 2.5% of its GDP on military expenditures. I recently read that the country is trying to buy 24 F-35s, for example. I don't know if it's true or false, but it's in the news. So there is a lot of investment that the government is making in defense. Now, in the US, defense-sponsored R&D through DARPA has created not only lasting military advantage for our forces, you know, things like stealth and precision-guided munitions, it has also created many dual-use technologies that today dominate the technology landscape. The internet, GPS, autonomous vehicles, Siri, even messenger RNA vaccines for COVID and other viruses that have created trillions of dollars of value. So it seems to me that the Greek government has an opportunity here to leverage its significant military expenditure to build a domestic R&D ecosystem that can create defense as well as dual-use technologies through judicious R&D investment. The UK, for example, has recently announced the intention to form ARIA, the Advanced Research and Invention Agency along the same lines as DARPA with a budget of 800 million pounds over 4 years. Maybe Greece next.
Thank you, Victoria. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time as the Prime Minister is coming in a few minutes for his interview and his discussion with the chairman of SEV and Endeavour. So I will go for a last question to Jim. And Jim, so another subject. Good leaders know that they need to continually learn and grow. Could you please share with us your recipe to grow and develop as a leader?
Yes, well, that's certainly true. Leaders need to set goals and direction and develop a strategy and tactics to achieve them. I think that the true test of a leader is whether that's communicated throughout the organization, understood and embraced. And the larger the organization, the more important that effort. As you said, leaders have to innovate, respond to competitive and market trends, adapt accordingly. I also think goals and financial metrics and budgets are not the only focus of an organization, or shouldn't be. Teams need to feel invested in the outcome, not just financially, but in the values and the culture of the organization. The values need to be clearly identified and shared. I think leaders have to be a model of those values that they espouse and the way that they treat people with integrity and decency. I think they have to convey a work ethic, a commitment to excellence. Through that commitment, a desire to succeed. I remember as a kid, my dad had a business, and in the summers, even when I was really young, he would take me into the office and we would be the first ones there. And I always said, Dad, you run this place. Why do we have to be the first one there and get up so early? He said, well, I want them to see me when they arrive. I never forgot that. I was just a kid. I think also humility as a leader is very important. In creative industries, I think there's another aspect to it, which is that the creative process in our business, the creative process is not precise by its nature. It's driven by artistic boldness and originality. And failure is a part of that. And I think you have to encourage people to be bold and courageous in their choices and to recognize that occasionally they'll fail, and that's okay. If they fail too much, it's a problem. But they need to know that can be part of it without recourse. I think that's about it.
Thank you. So, as a closing statement, I would like to pose a rhetoric question. History has shown that apart from market-based innovation, statewide initiative in the form of grand challenges like Man on the Moon, Best Army in the World, the building the largest physics experiment in the world, have contributed to spur innovation and spillover effects to all aspects of life and business. A recent experience of a country smaller than Greece, Estonia, became a global leader in e-government, having set themselves as a national challenge. Can Greece set such a challenge, and if so, in which areas? Shipping, digital nomads, virtual classic culture, etc. That's a thing for everyone to think about. Thanks again for watching, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Good evening. Mr. Prime Minister, I would like to welcome you and thank you for accepting this invitation by Innovative Greeks and the opportunity you give us today to have this discussion about innovation and the transformation of the Greek economy. The IG initiative brings together more than 9,000 people, maybe more than 10,000 people from many different countries, especially the US. The message of the Greek transformation is also international, hence our discussion will be in English. Innovative Greeks is a collaboration between 7 Endeavour to create a community for Greeks around the world who want to be part of the Greek transformation narrative. We would like to summarize our discussion today into 3 main subjects: leveraging the Greek diaspora, boosting innovation capacity, and attracting foreign direct investment. And with that, I would like to ask Dimitris Papalexopoulos, Chairman of SEVT, to join me with his first question. Dimitri?
Thank you, Constanza, and thank you for joining us, Prime Minister. It has been a recurring lament over decades that the Greek economy has been unable to benefit anywhere near as much as it could and should from the sizable and highly successful Greek diaspora. And it's certainly not because of lack of interest or goodwill from Greeks abroad. The quality of the panelists we had the chance to witness a few minutes ago, who readily agreed to participate in this event, the fact that over 10,000 Greeks have already signed up to engage in the Innovative Greeks platform demonstrates that this once again. So the problems are clearly deeper and more systemic. So I would put it to you that the timing is as good as it has ever been to break decisively with the past. Disruption is creating new opportunities. Access to technology is being democratized. Local ecosystems are growing. Financing is more readily available. Easy connectivity provides a big boost. The brain drain community that has painfully emerged over the past decade is actually in some ways an enabler. And even the pandemic is useful in accelerating things. So your government and you personally have shown appreciation of those challenges and opportunities involved and have acted in this direction. So the question we would like to start off with is, what do you think should be our level of ambition? Can we do plus 10% or can we think 10x? How can we transcend the infamous Greek reality and scale up meaningfully?
First of all, Constanza and Dimitri, thank you very much for the opportunity you gave me to participate in what I understand is a very, very interesting online discussion. I gather that you have thousands of people participating from all over the world. And this, I think, is particularly encouraging because it shows a level of engagement with what is happening in Greece, which in my mind is a clear sign of optimism regarding our ability to take the country forward in big leaps. Our government is not a government that is focused on incremental change. Our ambitions are much more substantial. I think this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to totally transform the country, the fabric of its economy, and the way we view ourselves, our relationship with the state, but also the opportunities we give to our people to grow and flourish. And if I can just make a bridge with the organization that is sponsoring this online debate, can we turn the innovative Greeks into an innovative Greece? What is it that makes Greeks flourish abroad, while when they return to Greece or when they, or for those who stay in Greece, they feel constrained by a system that cannot unleash their degree of creativity? I think this is a fundamental question that we need to answer, and we need to be bold in the way we do things and in thinking in a completely different manner. We are not going to change the country dramatically if we keep on doing things the same way as we did them in the past. And you mentioned the pandemic, which in my mind is, in the midst of this horrific healthcare crisis, it is also a tremendous opportunity to transform the way we engage with the public sector, to reprioritize public health as an important value, but also as a policy priority. And at the same time, to make sure that we unleash creative forces which are by nature disruptive. Just two examples, which I'm sure we may touch upon as the discussion continues. It was mentioned in the previous panel that Estonia at one point set the bar very high when it came to its own leadership in e-government. But I can tell you that what is happening right now in Greece in terms of the digital transformation of the state is completely groundbreaking. For years, we've been talking about facilitating the interaction between citizens and businesses with the state using technology. We've actually made it happen, and there is still much more to do, but we've demonstrated that this is something actually that we can do. Look at the way we deliver our vaccine program. It's fully digital. We notify people through an SMS. They book their appointment. If they need to change, they go online and change it. And once they show up in one of the vaccination centers we've set up, they're treated with dignity and respect. And everyone seems very happy with the way we are rolling out this extremely complex process. I'm saying all this because it is particularly important if we want to really change the country and think in terms of 10x rather than 10% incremental change, that we build a level of trust between the state, between the political elites, and between the citizens, which clearly was not there over, I'd say, many decades. And certainly that level of trust was actually shattered by the crisis. So I'm a big believer in trust as a social capital that drives countries forward. And I think during the pandemic, in spite of the great difficulties, we've taken important steps in that direction.
Starting from 2017, not only the number of Greeks emigrating abroad got stabilized, but also the number of Greeks returning to the homeland increased. Last year, almost 130,000 people returned, and most of them are people with a higher educational degree. So there are signs that we are moving from brain drain to brain regain. What are your thoughts on how to accelerate that trend?
Well, as you know, and as many of the people who, many of our friends who follow this discussion know, a lot of young, talented people had to leave Greece over the past decade in search of better opportunities. They left primarily because there were not enough jobs in Greece, or the jobs that were offered did not satisfy the people who actually left Greece on various fronts. And I think it is very, very encouraging that many of those who have left are contemplating to return to Greece. And they will do so for various reasons. Obviously, the Greek economy will need to create good-paying jobs that satisfy the ambitions of people who can actually choose to return to Greece, because they now have an opportunity to pursue employment abroad. So creating new jobs in those areas where the country, those fields where the country has a competitive advantage is particularly important. But it's not just that. I think if someone decides to return to Greece after having spent many years abroad, they will not just look at the job they can get in Greece. They will also look at the broader context. They will look at issues such as quality of life, whether this is a truly meritocratic country. At the end of the day, it's going to be a vote of confidence in the long-term perspective and in the long-term ambitions of the country. And I think the reason why many people are contemplating to return to Greece now is because they honestly believe, and I honestly believe the same thing, is that we've turned the corner and that we're at the beginning of a long-term growth cycle that will truly transform the country. And I do encourage Greeks abroad to be part of this new chapter of Greek history, because we need their skills, we need their innovative talent, we need their experiences abroad. And at a time when maybe the scarcest form of capital is human capital, this talent pool that we have, the people who are living abroad and are looking to return to Greece, provide us with a significant comparative advantage. And we might also want to make it easy for these people to return. That is why we've set up various tax schemes for people who have been tax residents abroad, if they choose to return to Greece, to have favorable tax treatments. That is why we are reducing taxes on high earners, abolishing the solidarity surcharge, reducing Social Security contributions, because at the end of the day, we want to make it more attractive for employees and for employers to pay good wages, and we want to be competitive. If your after-tax income in Greece is in a position of significant disadvantage vis-a-vis another country, you may think twice about returning to Greece. So I do think, Constanza, that the stars are aligned for appealing to the Greek diaspora and ask them to seriously consider to return to Greece. And in these days of mobile labor, they may not even need to return permanently. I think one of the great advantages of Greece in the post-pandemic era is exactly related to the fact that it has been proven that you can work from anywhere. Greece offers a safe environment, excellent connectivity, fantastic quality of life. So we are also appealing not just to Greeks, but to non-Greeks who want to relocate to Greece or to spend a significant amount of their time in Greece. You should be very ambitious. Greece should be the best place in the world to work from, whether you're Greek or non-Greek. And this is opening up a whole new array of opportunities also for the economy to create new jobs, attract new investments, and grow significantly over the next years.
Let me perhaps add to what you said, Prime Minister, that there are several indications that your steps to invite non-Greeks to come to Greece as well, there's anecdotal evidence that there's several taking advantage of that. But let me come back to the brain drainers, if I can, for a minute. Some of them will probably elect not to return. And I've heard the argument made that maybe that's a positive thing for Greece in some ways. How can we make the best of the ones who elect to stay there despite everything? Can we do more?
Of course we can, and it is clear that not everyone is going to return. First of all, we want Greeks to be involved in Greek affairs, and there are various ways of doing this. We made sure that we fulfilled our commitment to allow Greeks to vote from where they reside, rather than having to return to Greece, pay for a ticket and make the trip in order to participate in the electoral process. I think this is an important step to make sure that Greeks who live abroad become more engaged in the political process. In an interconnected world, we need to create networks that leverage the expertise of Greeks in various sectors where they can add significant value to the country. Let me just give you one example. We have incredibly talented Greeks, as you know, active in the healthcare sector. Many of them very active in the United States. Some of them leading, companies that are also very much in the news because of their active participation in the vaccine effort against COVID. We have created, and I've created at my level, a network of Greeks or people who are related in one way or another to Greece who advise us on the next generation of healthcare and how we can take advantage of the momentous changes happening in the healthcare industry and the fusion between healthcare and technology. So one doesn't necessarily need to return to Greece to add value to the country, as long as they have an interest in helping their country, either with their knowledge or with their capital, because we're also appealing, obviously, to Greeks abroad to invest in the country, be it from a small investment, it could be a real estate investment, to much more significant productive investments. And we make the case to Greeks and non-Greeks alike that Greece is becoming an attractive investment destination. Last but not least, I think civic engagement, non-profit work these days is particularly important. It's another venue, another path where Greeks abroad can become engaged in what is happening in Greece based on their own personal sensitivities and interests. Endeavor is a global non-profit organization that has been established in Greece and is doing a fantastic job working with the Greek startup ecosystem and providing knowledge and support to aspiring young entrepreneurs. One can provide added value by serving as a mentor to a young company from abroad. It's so easy now to do it with the new communication technology. So there are numerous ways. If you're interested, there are numerous ways of actually helping the country. And by helping the country, I don't just mean helping the government. Help businesses, help civic society, and be part of this new vision that is being articulated about where the country is going. And we should remember that this is an important date for the country. We're celebrating 200 years since the beginning of the Greek Revolution, so it's a good opportunity to look back and to assess the times when we were successful, but also to chart a course into the future. So this is not just about celebrating what we have achieved, and I think we've achieved a lot as a nation state, but also to really chart a course for an ambitious next decade.
Despite the unprecedented circumstances we all went through and this disruption in almost all businesses, 2020 has been a great year for Greek innovation. We saw a record number of acquisitions for Greek technology companies that reached almost $500 million. The Greek startups raised a record level of capital. Endeavor estimates this number to be more than $350 million in just 2020. And at the same time, multiple research centers of excellence were established by large multinationals. However, innovation is not only about technology, it's a mindset. It's not just an aspirational goal, it's the capacity to successfully adapt. New business models lead to diversified products or new services that accelerate growth. Innovation has become now maybe more relevant than any other period because adversity sometimes forces societies to advance and accelerates change. So we have an opportunity here, a crisis that should not be wasted. It is widely accepted that if we are to aim to sustainable long-term growth in a way that could lift living standards, then increasing our collective capacity to innovate is an imperative. This obviously touches a radical rethink of our educational system, better link between universities and business, an exponential leap in upskilling and reskilling, more emphasis on R&D and our efforts to help the companies to scale up. And in all this, governments have an important role to play. So what are your plans, Mr. Prime Minister? What are your priorities for raising Greece's innovation capacity?
Oh, where shall I start? I mean, you touched upon various very, very important themes. First of all, let me add my congratulations to those startup companies that have succeeded in taking the next step forward, because as you pointed out, it is evidence that Greece now, after lots of effort, has a vibrant ecosystem of startup companies, not just technology companies, but companies that innovate in general. And it also has a vibrant venture capital scene with venture capital funds that have been co-funded by European funds. And this is only one indication of how the government can support innovation and the startup ecosystem. So I'm very, very happy that during the crisis, many Greeks discovered the beauty of entrepreneurship, and that entrepreneurship is no longer a tarnished concept as it was maybe in previous decades, and that it is something that actually young Greeks aspire to. Because as we know, Greeks have been, and as we've discussed during the opening of our session, Greeks have been incredibly successful as innovators, as business creators abroad. Why shouldn't this also happen in Greece? And this is my personal passion, my personal vision, maybe because I spent most of my professional career in venture capital before I entered politics. I sort of now see us at last catching up with what I was hoping to do maybe 15 years ago when Greek society was maybe not ready at the time. I think it is very important that we are teaching, that we're beginning to teach entrepreneurship at schools. And it's fascinating every time we engage our teenagers in innovative projects, be it virtual businesses or robotics competitions, how much genuine talent and enthusiasm is exuded through these processes. And I think our young generation is incredibly talented. And once they go to university in Greece, we need to make sure, as you pointed out, that universities are much more connected with a real life and with real businesses. And for those who don't go to university, we need to make sure that we give them the necessary vocational training and opportunities and technical education that they can also aspire to be able to be successful. And why not to innovate and create businesses. As far as technology is concerned, we do know that our public universities are producing incredibly talented and well-trained young graduates. And I think that is also why a lot of foreign companies are looking to come to Greece to set up innovation centers, because they know that they can tap into a pool of human capital that is hardworking, ambitious, and very, very talented. And this is happening not just in Athens, it's happening in Thessaloniki, it's happening in Yanina, it's happening in Heraklion, it's happening in Chania, it's happening in cities that have universities with a strong technical background. And this, I think, is incredibly encouraging. And of course, there are many other ways that we need to foster and strengthen innovation. Dear Dimitri, as president of SEV, you know that Greek businesses need to invest more in R&D because a lot of the innovation is privately driven, and we've given additional tax incentives to private businesses to invest more in R&D. And of course, we also need to streamline our public funding of research by setting up also technology centers of excellence. We are with the Deputy Minister for Innovation launching a very ambitious project, taking over an abandoned factory towards Piraeus to create, a true innovation hub in Athens that will fuse research and startup activities. So, and this is not a real estate project in itself, but it's an opportunity to create, a concentrated ecosystem that will foster innovation. And of course, we need to let universities, public universities, we need to let them free to cooperate with the private sector and make sure that they establish these links, which in the past, unfortunately, by many were considered anathema, which is a very, very distorted way of looking at how higher public education needs to function. Of course, one should never forget that innovation, as you pointed out, Constanza, is not just about technology. You can have extremely innovative companies that simply reinvent, basic business models. There is probably going to be a technological component to any innovation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a patent and you need to invent something, either in terms of hardware or in terms of software. It also means using, existing tools in a different manner. So I think the opportunities are really significant. But what I most appreciate is this buzz coming out of the startup ecosystem and the number of young people who rather than seeking an employment maybe in the public sector, as was the case, maybe 10, 15 years ago, are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, becoming innovators. I'm not saying that we don't need talented people in the public sector. We will always need highly talented people in the public sector, and we seek to hire them through purely meritocratic procedures. But this level of ambition that you can do anything, you can set up a successful startup out of Greece, is something which I see for the first time. And frankly, it is tremendously encouraging and highly, highly optimistic.
You've opened up through your answer a series of further questions, and if you will allow us, we'll stick with innovation for a bit longer. Let me perhaps focus a little more on education and skills. I think, as you pointed out, our universities have a long positive tradition in the vitally important areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. Yet, in a country today where 42% of young people have a university education, and unemployment still exceeds 15%, over 1/3 of Greek companies tell us every day that they have a hard time finding the right people to hire. So how do we reconcile this apparent contradiction? Is it about scaling up knowledge of data science and modernizing our STEM curriculum? Is it a question of scaling up? Or is it maybe more about the soft skills of the 21st century, the creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, the 4 C's that are increasingly thought of as key components of modern education? Could you share some more thoughts on what we should be doing on the education and upskilling side?
I think it's probably both. There are lots of things that we still need to do in terms of our public education system. Essentially, starting with kindergarten, looking at the way our schools function, the curriculum, the way we teach our kids those skills which we know are so important in the 21st century. And then what is it that they actually learn at university? How do they actually choose what to study? I consider that to be of paramount importance. And one of the legislative changes that we introduced, Dimitri, in the recent law we passed on higher education is exactly looking at this, maybe encouraging our 17 or 18-year-olds to slightly limit their choice of schools where they apply to, in order for them to have a higher probability to study something that they really care and love. I don't believe in the value-added degrees simply for the sake of obtaining a university degree if you end up studying something which you have zero interest in. And we also know that the rate of dropouts and the students that don't graduate, if they end up in a school where they just simply don't care about what they study, is high. So we need to look at essentially re-engineering our entire education system, starting from our schools. And that is why these soft skills, which we're beginning to tentatively introduce in our curriculum, are so important. Education is no longer about memorizing knowledge. We can look up any piece of information is freely available. It's about critical thinking. It's about learning how to express yourself, learning how to write, learning how to cooperate, learning how to be able to overcome difficulties, be resilient. And all these are skills that we need to teach our kids, starting with our schools. Obviously, we also teach our kids at home, but we need to teach these skills at school. And that involves, a fundamental reassessment of our public education system. And it's going to take time. These are not easy changes. And when it comes to our universities, but also our schools, evaluation is obviously particularly important. I've been rather unapologetic in terms of explaining to our universities that a certain component of funding will be tied to independent assessment of their performance. Of course, there are aspects and fields where we know that there will be a greater demand, such as data sciences, which obviously need to be further strengthened, and we need to increase capacity in those fields. And of course, then there is the issue of lifelong training, of acquiring skills post-university, of retraining, of what we call upskilling or reskilling, where the private sector can also add significant value. How do you convert a STEM graduate who may have studied mathematics into a programmer? And what sort of additional training and certification can you give to such a person in order to use their fundamental sort of scientific knowledge in a more productive direction? And I need to point out that there are significant European funds also available through what we call the Recovery and Resilience Fund that we intend to direct into that priority of strengthening our labor force and making sure that especially our young people, but also citizens that that have significant work experience can acquire new skills that will increase their probability of leading a successful professional career.
Mr. Prime Minister, because you threw down the gauntlet to the private sector justifiably on two issues, both insufficient R&D and indirectly not investing enough in upskilling our people and investing in developing our people. And I think the statistics clearly show that you are right. And this is an area of responsibility we have to work in as companies, as a private sector. Having said that, it is partly a reflection of the structure of the Greek economy. So 62% of the workforce is employed by small companies. Or to look at it inversely, only 12% of the Greek labor force is in companies of over 250 people each, versus 33% in the European Union. So the question is, it's obviously not easy, but how do we shift the structure so as to increase the number of companies that have the critical mass to compete internationally, to invest in R&D, to develop people?
Well, yes, we need bigger companies, and there are two ways to grow a company. One is to grow organically, which is really the company's job. The other way is to grow through collaborations, mergers, acquisitions, and we probably need a package to make these these types of transactions more attractive in order to create the necessary scale. But there is also, I may sort of go slightly against the trend to argue that sometimes small can also be beautiful, in the sense that you can see companies that may be small. Look at, for example, a small, cozy family-run hotel that is focusing on sustainability and focus and offering real quality to its visitors, being a very successful business in its own right. So it doesn't mean that all companies, by definition, need to be big to be successful. And for example, look at the COVID experience, or interestingly enough, a lot of smaller companies who actually knew their customers well, regional shops, if you gave them the right tools, actually maybe adapted easier than larger companies that were tied up in complicated supply chains. So not everything in the Greek economy is going to be big. There are companies that may be and business ventures that may be very successful and provide a very decent income to the owners and their employees by staying relatively small. For example, a quality restaurant may never be able to grow because that's what as a sort of, a good chef can do. But of course, there is, the other aspect is that clearly in areas such as manufacturing, where we can do much more to add up scale. We need to be certain that we provide the right framework for incentives in order for companies to grow. And sometimes this growth has to come not just through organic growth; it has to come through mergers, through maybe accepting private capital to invest in the company. And maybe sometime, the owner of a company may choose to have a smaller share in a bigger company than a bigger share in a smaller company. And, knowing the psyche of Greek entrepreneurs and Greek business people, Dimitri, this is not always easy to accept.
Well aware.
One last question in this topic before we move for the FDI. How can Greece capitalize the opportunities for international partnerships like those with Pfizer, Microsoft, Amazon? In other words, how can Greece become a regional innovation hub?
Well, I think it's already happening. And it's happening because all these companies took a hard look at Greece, compared the opportunity to invest in Greece with the opportunity to invest in other countries, and decided that it's worthwhile to invest in Greece. And for many of these companies, that would have been inconceivable a few years ago. Various reasons why this is happening. I think these big multinational companies feel comfortable with a government, and I don't like necessarily to use the term pro-business, but a government that is reliable and keeps its word and is committed to making the life of foreign investors easier. And of course, as we discussed, I think they appreciated the intrinsic comparative advantages of the country, access to human capital being, a very, very important one. So, sometimes this is acting, you just need, a couple of big investments to act as a snowball effect and to actually become part of the international investment map. And I think this is already happening in Greece. People are looking at Greece for investments, not necessarily just in those sectors where they always wanted to invest in Greece, such as tourism. Look at the Pfizer example. They set up a big data center in Thessaloniki, and they're not the only example of companies that are looking to invest in data science and employ talented Greeks and pay good salaries. Pfizer is only one example of company that has actually done that. So there will be numerous opportunities for companies to look at Greece. Other companies may look at Greece for as a regional hub for shared services, what we used to call back office, because of Greece's excellent connectivity. We shouldn't forget that Greece is centrally, located in terms of being close to the Balkans, being close to the Middle East, being closer than other countries to Eastern Africa. So this being closer to India, which in my mind is a completely new, untapped market for Greek companies, but also for investors from India to come into Greece. So our geographic location is a big advantage to also attract companies that are looking to set up regional headquarters, and this is also beginning to happen.
Which is a wonderful transition to coming to the issue of foreign direct investment and reforms. So investment at scale is imperative if we are to increase the metabolic rate of the growth of the Greek economy. Gross investments in 2019 were a little over 10% of GDP versus an average of over 20% at the European Union. And this leaves a gap of maybe 20 billion euros a year. And clearly, foreign direct investment needs to be a big part of that mix. It not only helps plug the gap, but brings additional benefits in terms of connecting the Greek economy with the global supply chains, boosting exports, creating clusters, like Constanza mentioned, that have a multiplier effect and develop talent. So after a very tough decade, Greece's image is on the mend. Trust, as you mentioned earlier, has increased. buoyed by a successful handling of the pandemic and the investor friendliness of a reform-oriented government. Foreign direct investment is up tenfold since 2010, at about $4.5 billion the year before COVID. And recent high-profile deals bear your personal imprint. Yet, investors are spoiled for choice, and Greece has a long way to go to become an attractive foreign direct investment destination. And there are those that worry that the economic cost of the pandemic risks blunting your government's willingness to push ahead with needed reforms. What do you tell them, and what reforms are you prioritizing in order to attract foreign direct investment?
Well, first of all, I would tell those who are concerned about us deviating from our reform path to look at our record. We passed more than 150 pieces of legislation since we took over, many of them in line with our electoral commitment to drastically change the country, and many of them related to our priority of attracting investment, domestic and foreign, to Greece. So under no circumstance has the pandemic derailed our primary task. Of course, all countries will be hit with a significant recession in 2020. But this is a systemic shock to all economies. And if anything, as we discussed, it may present Greece with also opportunities to rebrand itself, and also opens up a new path for opportunities that were not present before the pandemic. But we know what foreign investors are really looking at. A stable political environment. I think we can guarantee that. We have an absolute majority in Parliament. We can take decisions quickly. We are not engaged in sort of coalition discussions. I think this is an advantage for the country at this given point. We are almost halfway through our term. We are doing rather well in the polls, which means that I think in spite of the difficulties, Greeks recognize that we are moving the country in the right direction. And of course, if you look at under the important topic of political risk and political stability, the fact that the country is no longer a European outlier, no longer a problem child, is very, very important. Greece is punching above its weight in Europe now. Nobody is talking to Greece or about Greece in the context of us having to deal with a debt crisis, reforms that are not happening. All these, we've left all this behind. And it happened very, very quickly. And it is particularly important for Greece because you know how much bad press we have received for almost a decade. So this rebranding happened very quickly. And I think it is particularly important for the image of the country as a whole. Then you look at issues such as regulation. We are, for example, as we speak, passing, I'm sure you're aware, a new legislation on public procurement, in line with the European directives, simplifying issues regarding public procurement, which made it too complicated and too difficult for companies to participate in tenders. We've done a significant amount of work in terms of reducing the tax burden. We are simplifying regulation across the board. We've managed to unblock, important investments such as, the old, Ellinikon airport, which seemed like, the Gordian knot. Nobody could actually deal with them, and it is moving forward. If you look at what's happening in the real estate market in Greece across the board, I think we're just at the beginning of a long-term upward trend. And if you also look at how all this is going to be reflected in the doing business indices, once it will be published, I think we will be very pleasantly surprised. And obviously, these are data that many international investors look at when they decide where to invest. And of course, just to complete from where we started, we also have lots of Greeks in the diaspora. who may pitch in and amplify our story. And it is important for this story to be told abroad. And I think it's also, I think that anyone who means well about the country is happy when the country is doing well, and is sad when the country is not doing well. I leave political preferences completely aside, and I think there are reasons to honestly believe, regardless of what people vote. And I think sometimes the Greeks who live abroad have a much clearer perspective of what's happening in Greece. We sometimes get bogged down into party politics way too much. But if you objectively look at Greece from abroad, the country is moving in the right direction.
Mr. Prime Minister, officially our time is over. If we could have 5 more minutes from your time. If not, we will move very fast to a final question from both of us.
I think we can have, Constance, I think we can have 5 more minutes.
Okay, great. So from the Endeavor Greece network, we saw 2 record-breaking exits last year. Microsoft acquired Softomotive and Delivery Hero acquired InstaShop. At the same time, your government has introduced many incentive schemes to enhance Greece's competitiveness as a place to live and work. You mentioned before tax cuts for entrepreneurs and employees, that they wish to relocate, tax benefits for foreign retirees, the non-dom program, and most recently, a regime for the establishment of family offices in Greece, which, if you allow me, maybe has some room for improvement in order to compete better internationally. So Greece is in the center of global attention, bearing the promise for a prosperous economy. How can we make Greece a significant destination for tech investments? But in other words, and in more general sense, what is the narrative, Mr. Prime Minister?
Well, I think the successes you presented are very, very important in terms of showing to the global tech world that there are opportunities in Greece that are worth exploring and possibly worth investing in. And you know how a vibrant tech ecosystem works, and I think we have the foundations to actually do that, and attract more capital and make sure that companies grow.
There's probably, I think there's a problem in connection.
Let's hold off for a second, see what happens.
Maybe at some point they will need to move abroad and establish their headquarters elsewhere, and that is perfectly fine if that is what needs to happen for them to grow. But we still want them to retain their Greek roots. But I think there's also another aspect of the tech ecosystem which is worth exploring, what we call the digital nomads, people who can literally work from anywhere. Sometimes are self-employed or work in small teams. And the pandemic has proven that you can actually work from anywhere, as we previously discussed. And those people, we already see them looking at Greece and them spending more time in Greece, investing in real estate, investing, in setting up maybe a small, legal foundation in order for them to do business. This is also, another very important, quote-unquote, market we need to address, because the nature of work is changing, and there I think we have a unique comparative advantage, which is a combination of the quality of life, which is so important and is going to become even more important. Excellent connectivity. One of the first countries to launch our 5G auctions. A safe country. The pandemic proved in spite of all the criticism, we have a good healthcare system, and you don't actually need to work in Athens. You can work from an island. You can work from a nice village in the mountains, and be very happy and live a very fulfilling life and contributing to the Greek economy. So this is another niche, and it's not a niche; it's an important, aspect of the tech industry we also need to focus on.
So, last question, we promise. Greek tech companies have grown from close to zero to, 10 years ago, to it's estimated a market cap of about 4 billion today. And Endeavor has played a significant role in several of those success stories. And the outlook looks promising. The first Greek unicorn, we hope, is not very far off. Several forward-looking Greek companies outside the tech industry are also transforming and digitizing. So Innovative Greeks aspires to turbocharge these trends. It is aiming to bring together the global community of Greeks working in tech, life sciences, or innovating in any other field, as mentioned earlier by the key instigators. So to spur networking, mentoring, partnerships, cross-border collaborations, business and career opportunities. And let me take this opportunity on behalf of both Costanza and myself to publicly thank the Endeavor and SEV teams who have brought this initiative this far and set up this fantastic event. And although it is clearly a collective effort, I would be amiss if I didn't single out Marcos Veremis, whose brainchild or possibly love child this has largely been. Thank you, Marco. So with that, Prime Minister, what would be your parting message to the over 10,000 people who have already signed up and are following Innovative Greeks?
Continue to engage with the country, follow what's happening in Greece, look for opportunities in Greece, help us change the country by contributing to Greece's success. And as we discussed, there are many ways of actually doing this. Some of you will choose to return to Greece for the next chapter of your life. But for those of you who will choose to live abroad, you will always retain an interest in what is happening in Greece. And as Dimitri pointed out, there are many, many ways of actually helping the country and be part of the success story of what we're trying to do. And again, if we could turn Innovative Greeks into Innovative Greece, that would be a tremendous success, and I think we would all be very, very happy and very proud if we could actually succeed in doing that.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for a very insightful conversation. Everyone at home, thank you very much for joining us for the first day of this event, the Innovative Greeks Conference. Join us again tomorrow afternoon with interesting discussions that will take place with renowned Greek business leaders and investors. Good night, everyone.
At Intrasoft, if there is one concept that describes who we are and what we do, it is innovation. That is the single word that captures the true essence of our efforts. But what is the true meaning of innovation? Is it just a vague definition? Is it a badge on the shirt of an employee? Or is it a poster on the cafeteria wall? No. Innovation constitutes the backbone of our corporate DNA. We are practically made of it. We live by it. We breathe it. And it can be easily summed up in two simple words: question everything. One solution against another. One idea against another. The better for the good. The best for the better. Nothing less, nothing more. It is our team of creative thinkers that gets us there. People who know that in order to agree, they must first see things differently. The 1,700 IT professionals of 20 different nationalities across the Intrasoft Group are the people behind all the innovative breakthrough technology products and services we deliver across 70 countries. From our cutting-edge e-customs technologies to digital analytics solutions, our people know well that innovation, first and foremost, is an exercise for daring hearts and brains. A leap out of one's comfort zone. Innovative minds are the reason we grow strong for the last 20 years. Because innovation is not written, it is coded into our DNA.
Για περισσότερα από 30 χρόνια, το Ινστιτούτο Βιομηχανικής Εκπαίδευσης και Κατάρτισης προσφέρει γνώσεις και δεξιότητες για πρωτοπορία. Με προγράμματα προσαρμοσμένα στις ανάγκες των συνεργατών μας, εκπαιδευόμενων και επιχειρήσεων. Προγράμματα που ενσωματώνουν την καινοτομία και εξωστρέφεια, που αναδεικνύουν δεξιότητες, συνδέουν τη γνώση με την αγορά εργασίας, προετοιμάζουν για τις εξελίξεις. Με παραρτήματα και σύγχρονες δομές που διασφαλίζουν την ποιότητα και αρτιότητα των υπηρεσιών μας σε κάθε γωνιά της χώρας μας. Διεθνείς πιστοποιήσεις και διαπιστεύσεις που επιβραβεύουν τη δράση μας και επισφραγίζουν την ποιότητά μας. Εφαρμοσμένη τεχνολογία μάθησης. Υπερσύγχρονα, πιστοποιημένα εργαστήρια για άμεση και μεθοδευμένη αλλαγή του τρόπου δουλειάς. Συνδέουμε τη θεωρία με την πράξη. Την πράξη με το αποτέλεσμα. ΙΒΠ. Γνώσεις και δεξιότητες για πρωτοπορία.